Okay, it is 4:20, and I am calling this special council meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the traditional territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht, and I move that the rules set out in Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 be temporarily suspended to allow for all council members to participate electronically in the regular council meeting of November 1st, 2021, and that the November 1st, 2021 special council meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Steer. There's no further comments. All in favor? Motion is carried. And if there's no objection to adopting the agenda as presented, I'll move adoption. Seeing no objection, agenda is adopted. Do we have any public comment on the agenda item? Ms. Best.
In her absence. We currently have nobody signed up or asking anything.
Excellent. Then moving on to bylaws. We have a meeting procedure amendment bylaw for adoption, and this is just to amend our meeting procedure to allow for these meetings to be held electronically. So without further ado, I recommend that the District of Tofino Meeting Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 1229.03 2021 be adopted. Seconded by Councillor Steer. Are there any comments for this bylaw amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Bylaw is adopted. And if there's nobody signed up for further questions, I'll move adjournment. Second by Councillor Steer. All in favor? Excellent. Meeting is adjourned. See you in a moment.
You're late.
Who's late?
Well, we had a special council meeting at 4:20.
Oh, shoot. I missed it. Was it important?
No, it's just proving that meeting procedure by law, etc.
Oh, right. I forgot about it. Yeah.
I think we might be live, so we might have to be careful what we say.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah, live on YouTube. Okay.
Mayor Law. Just noticed in number 2, there's a typo in the approval of meeting location. That should read November 1st.
By October 1st. Oh, yes, you're right. You know what? Councillor Steer is chairing the meeting, so noted, Councillor Steer.
Councillor
Yes,
Steer,
noted.
I've noticed a typo in.
Noted. So with that in mind, I'll call the meeting to order at 16:30 and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And with just the information that was just provided, the approval of the meeting location today, the recommendation is that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229/2016 as amended, the November 1st, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at the Council Chambers at Municipal Hall 161 3rd Street in Tofino, BC. And second, thank you, Mayor Law. I'll call question. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Next up on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda for the November 1st, 2021 Committee of the Whole. Motion to adopt. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Mayor Law. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. And we'll have an adoption of the minutes. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, seconded by Mayor Law. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have our public comment on agenda items, and I see Bria's come up on screen. Was there anybody today that had a comment or question?
Yes, we have Eileen Floody here. She wants to speak to item 8.2.
8.2. So if we could bring Elaine up, and she has, I believe, 2 minutes to speak towards an agenda item, 8.2.
Hi, everyone. It's Eileen, and the 8.2, the Campbell Street upgrade, I gave information or feedback online and directly to April in a walk down the street. And I would just like to emphasize that I would like to see any changes made without cutting down any trees. If we can please emphasize that our natural environment and the few urban trees we have in that area need to be preserved, that cars should take a lesser role in all of this. One of the things about that street is it's mostly offshore parking. I don't know if that's going to be planned to change, but that one side that's offshore parking along Campbell Street now is always full of offshore cars. I don't think I ever see them. I don't know whether they come and go, but every time I go down there, it's completely full. And then just on the parking thing, like having the angle parking going in the other direction, because that's the way you drive down the road, is kind of foolish, because the road stops at the water. So anybody who wants to park on, like if you're facing the water on the left-hand side of the road, is going to have to go drive down the road, do the turnaround at the end to get into the parking, which is angled the other way, right? And right now it's dead on, so you can just drive in and pull in. So there's a number of trees that are under threat because of this plan, and taking shade away and taking green space away during a climate emergency, and when people need shade and all of that for any heat waves that we might have in the future, I think is really, really foolish. So I hope you will let the designers know that they need to adjust for living things. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eileen. Appreciate the comments. Bree, is there anybody else signed up today for questions or comments on agenda items?
No, we have nobody else.
Great, thank you. And I believe there are no correspondence. But we do have a delegation today, and we have Jen Dart, the Executive Director of the Tofino Long Beach Chamber of Commerce, regarding the Business Retention and Expansion Program. And Jen, if you're there, you have 10 minutes, and that does not include questions and follow-up afterwards. I don't know if Bree's got you promoted up yet.
I think she does.
There you are. Good. There you are.
Thank you, Councillor Steer, and hi, council members. Nice to see you all. I'm Jen Dart. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce here in town. Sorry about my lighting. I'm just a little bit dark today. Might be a bit of rain and a bit of lighting issues. But I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to address you today about our program plan that we've developed with the help of grant funding. And Bree, I'm not sure, is it possible to bring up the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll just say next slide when I would like you to change, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So as you all know, the Chamber has an existing 5-year fee-for-service agreement with the district, and that agreement has 4 components to it. Business support, business promotion and retention, maintaining the community economic profile, and then doing business roundtable discussions, so sector check-ins. I'll just wait for that presentation to come up possibly. But while that gets organized, we have under business support, we provide general support services to the business community. We also deliver activities, workshops, guest speakers, develop and distribute resources, and do shop local promotion. We have a presence at relevant community events, and then also participated in economic development activities like the VIA Vancouver Island Economic Alliance Summit that was just held online last week. I'm waiting for those slides before I continue, maybe just.
Sorry, 1 second here. Let me just share my screen here.
But I can tell you about that after we presented to you in March of this year. We had been talking to you about the 2020 program. Oh, there we go. Thanks. That's awesome. We can probably flip ahead to slide number 2.
Sorry, 1 second here. I'm so sorry, Jen.
Okay, no worries. Technical stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, in March we just presented about the 2020 program year and how we mostly pivoted the work to COVID-19 support, and we were very happy to be able to do that on short notice. And that work continues, and the work of the contract continues, obviously. But one of the underlying wishes of the program has always been to look at ways to expand the capacity of the chamber and delve a bit deeper into what sort of support does our business community need. So business retention and expansion work sort of beyond the what's included in the contract, a little bit of capacity building to deliver more of those services to the business community.
Jen, are you able to see that now?
I can definitely, yeah, I can totally see it. If you wouldn't mind just scrolling up. Perfect, that's great.
Okay.
So that was what we sort of just went over. Those are the 4 components of the existing contract. If you could scroll down. And one more slide, please. Okay.
Business retention?
I think we've covered that. Sorry, next
Okay.
one. Sorry.
That one. Okay.
Generally speaking, a business retention and expansion program it's widely used to support community economic development by focusing on the needs and challenges facing the existing business community. So it's one of 3 routes for active expansion, along with attracting new companies to the community and then entrepreneurship as well. So it's generally regarded, this work as the most practical and accessible method for economic development at the community level, supporting the businesses that are already here. And the effect of the work is that it improves the business environment for new startups as well, by improving overall conditions. Often you are usually the responsibility of an ECDEV official, and forms part of a larger part of an ECDEV strategy, which something that we don't currently have in Tofino. But we developed this program plan with the help of a rural dividend program grant that we received prior to COVID. We were able to engage a consultant to develop a program that is, if you're familiar a little bit with the UBER program in Ucluelet, this is similar, but I would say that it's smaller and hopefully more sustainable on a smaller scale, I would say, but somewhat quite similar. So if I could get the next slide, please. So these are kind of the reasons why to engage in this work in the community. It's less costly to help the local companies than to chase investment from elsewhere. They create the majority of new jobs. Building better linkages within the business community contributes to overall resilience, and having information that's current on business conditions makes your job easier and decisions more informed. Next slide, please. So this is, you all received a copy of the work plan in your council package. If I could get the next slide, just on the objectives. So ours are very similar to other BRE programs to increase understanding of challenges and concerns, to have some kind of effective response to the challenges that have been raised, to have year-over-year data that we don't currently have, and that can be used to support other community initiatives, and then also to have those enhanced linkages to identify common issues and possibly solutions as well. So these objectives that we've identified also kind of speak to where the chamber is seeing gaps in our own ability to support businesses and to respond to some of these issues. And I would say that Tofino is probably not in need of economic development in the traditional sense of the term. We sort of have other needs around diversification and supporting existing businesses that are struggling in certain ways, and also finding creative solutions to problems being faced by our local business community. Can I get the next slide, please? So this program would fit within several aspects of the OCP, but especially under guiding principle number 7 of a sustainable local economy. We can flip again, please, Bree. And there's, you've seen the project proposal, but these are the details. So there's a part-time interviewer researcher position. There's a committee of local stakeholders that sort of drive the objectives of the program. Administrative oversight by the chamber, data collection through BC Economic Development Association software. And then the programs and initiatives that come out of that data will be administered and discussed by the committee. And then also a communication strategy is included. I would say that the funding is going to be a little bit tricky. We'll talk about numbers in just a moment, but because that rural dividend fund was pivoted to assist communities that experience the effects of forest fires, it's not currently available, although it has not been canceled. We just haven't heard about how it's going to might be morphed into something else. ICE-T, the Island Coastal Economic Trust, has several funding streams. This doesn't exactly fit under any of them, unfortunately, but we're talking to them. They normally do larger projects like a formal ECDEV strategy. So we'll continue to seek funding, including from the ACRD. I know you have a discussion about business license regulation on your agenda today. So I just wanted to inform you of this work that we've done to let you know where we're at with it. And definitely we are looking at not a great environment currently for business retention and expansion as the province and others continue to deal with COVID fallout. And obviously we had the CDAC committee that is no longer operating. So there's a bit of a void in this area right now, but there's definitely ongoing challenges that we feel need to be addressed. So we know that businesses are struggling, and a lot of our issues are similar to what we're hearing across the province, but we do have some that are uniquely our own. Can I get the next slide, please? And I just wanted to give you an idea of where this project might fit on a continuum of community economic development. And I think we're sort of in the top right-hand corner of this. We're hoping to engage local stakeholders, and we have done some of that. And we're sort of moving along into identifying opportunities and strategies. But definitely this kind of work is a team concept. So the organization that might administer this type of program, compile the results is only one part of it. So depending on what issues get identified, we as the chamber may not be the best organization to respond, but building those relationships and having those important people, some of whom were likely at the CDAC table that could potentially be part of this advisory committee as well. That is sort of the most important collaborative aspect to it. So I've presented quite a bit of information. I gave you a lot of information, so I'll kind of stop there and see if anybody has any questions. But basically, we just wanted to let you know that we've been able to complete this work, a little bit of COVID delay, but we have this program plan in place that we are seeking funding for. And obviously we have an existing contract. So yeah, we're not asking for anything specifically. We just wanted to let you know and answer any questions you may have and sort of give you an idea of where we'd like to take it.
Great, thanks, Jen. That was bang on 10 minutes, even with technical delays. Super. So if there is questions for Jen, I know you weren't making any particular ask, but thanks for presentation there. It was great having the report and everything up ahead of time so we could read it over. Is there any questions from council for Jen? I've got Councillor Anderson, then Councillor McMaster.
Hi, Jen. My question is just around funding. I know I don't think you're asking at this moment, but will you be seeking funding from the district or from those grant streams?
Well, I would say probably both. We'd like to hear from you whether this is a program that would be of interest, and we'll continue to seek it from elsewhere as well. So the program in the year one is price tag of about 52,000 in the first year and then 40,000 in subsequent years. So that's sort of at a scaled down version of talking to about 10 to 20 large employers per year, roughly 40 small and medium employers, like I'm talking number of staff here, sorry. And then leaving some room for special topic or industry focus if that's, if the committee identifies that with the help of its members as something that might be needed. So it is a scaled down version of what I guess we were initially hoping to do, but that's when we saw the projections around the budget, it was sort of seemed like it was something we'd have to scale down a little bit. So the answer is both, I guess. We're not asking for anything right now, but we just did want to make you aware both the cost and what the benefits of this type of program could be.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor McMaster.
Hi, Jen. Notionally, I'm in support. Obviously, just like yourself, recognise funding is going to be an issue. I just wondered, you mentioned 1 to 2 years and then ongoing. How long do you really see this going on for?
Well, until the district is able to move, or some iteration of economic development becomes a more permanent place in the District of Tofino, I guess. We have a little bit of support from the ACRD at the moment, but really, without that committee that was meeting on a regular basis, there's not much work happening in this area at the moment. So I guess I would say that it wouldn't necessarily even have to happen every year. Maybe it's an every 2-year type of interviews that happen, but I think until there's a more permanent solution, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that.
Great, thanks. Councillor Thick.
Thanks, Jen. That was good. I had 2 questions and 1 comment. And the question, I'm missing like the evolution of this. Did I miss something? I was part of that CDAC committee at the beginning, but I missed the part between, can you just explain what happened after that committee dissolved and what brought us to this point today? That's my first question.
Well, there's a few things, and some of it has to do with the chamber board as well. there's a lack of information. It's actually a really good question, because I don't think I went into that too much. But we're asked on a fairly ongoing basis by the Tofino Housing Corporation and other consultants to provide some information, both about the number of businesses, and through this contract work as well, we're being asked for information on an ongoing basis around staff housing, number of staff, number of businesses in certain sectors, and so on and so forth. And some of that is contained within the community profile, and a lot of it is not. So we're finding we're having to do surveys on an ongoing basis that are, we're getting about a 20% response rate, which isn't bad, but we're definitely not capturing all the information that we could be. And so that's, we're continuously coming up against that question of the lack of data, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it was partly that in response to that, also partly because this is a very, this process is sort of used by a lot of small communities to try to engage their business community. And it's a pretty tried and true method, business retention and expansion work. Also because the Chamber Board does see that there's a bit of a gap in this area in town. So the CDAC had some role in this area for sure. And we did some good things at that table. But I guess I would say it's sort of the next step in the traditional ECTF process, I guess. It's a way to start this work that's not too ambitious, I guess, and it's providing information that is lacking now.
Yeah, great. Thanks for filling in those gaps, because as I said, I think it was really hard. Not that the CDAC committee was the be all and end all or should continue on, but you're right. I think the ball was kind of dropped at that point, and nothing was picked up as after that happened. So thank you for explaining that. And I do remember one UBCM when I think Selena Robinson might have been the minister then, but this big, all of a sudden the light went on that they understood that rural communities were not just smaller, big communities, but they were something different. So I think putting these pieces together is helpful for me, and hopefully is for some others too. I think one of the key words in that report was for me was diversity. And when it comes to the OCP, I think that's actually one of the very key things that our community needs to be thinking about. So I'm glad you tied that back to the OCP, but I didn't see it unpackaged very much in the report. So I'm just sort of bringing it out in the open, saying that I think that this diversification of business within our community is really, really important. So thanks for highlighting that. And the only other thing was, we were talking about, there was something in the report about success and I guess my question is, how would the chamber measure whether they had achieved success? I mean, sometimes small businesses, it's the bottom line, but from the District of Tofino's point of view, it could be more diversification. Like, do we have 3 more businesses between now and 2023 that are not tourism related? How we measure that is something that would be important to me as well. Not just in terms of businesses increasing the bottom line, but how do we measure whether we've actually helped to facilitate other businesses come into town that increase our diversity of offering? So that was just another question about how do we measure the success of the project. And as Councillor McMaster said, I think notionally I would also be in support of this, but I think, yeah, for me that issue about, or that concept of diversity is very, very important. So
yeah, and in the work plan it does speak to identifying, making sure that the existing industries that we do have are all included in those interviews on a. Because we do have other industries that perhaps we're not focused on all the time. Also, to your point about diversification and what we would consider some of the success to come out of it. Well, first of all, engagement would be one way to measure having project success, and also just having that information that we could look back on year over year, which we don't currently have. Nobody is compiling this information yet around number of businesses, number of staff in each different industry that we do have. In Ucluelet, there was some really easy wins that they experienced around, for example, a forklift operator course. There was several businesses who needed forklift training, and they were able to bring that into town, train 10 to 12 people, and that was just a very easy win. So there's small wins, and then there, like you were talking about, there's bigger wins. And for us, I think a bigger win would be solving some of the issues that some of our current businesses are facing. And then also diversification is like you said, a very important part of the whole mix. So thanks for those comments.
And thanks for picking this up, and thanks for running with it and just presenting these ideas to us, because I think this is really great. So thank you for doing it.
Okay, well, that's great. And like I said, we just want to keep you apprised at this point and let you know what we're working on. And I'm happy to hear any feedback at any point in time, suggestions. If you have any interest in being part of that eventual advisory committee, if this comes to fruition, I'd love to know that as well.
Mayor Law, did you have a question there, Mayor? Yeah.
Just a quick comment. Thanks, Jen, for this, and just to let you know that I am in support of this at this time, and I did recognize through the COVID, you know, how we were working with businesses and and Island Health, that there was a lack of data for our business community, and that really did shine through, and so I do appreciate all the work that you did personally to try to fill in some of those gaps with data. And so going forward, I think the more data, the more carefully it's compiled, in broad data, not just, you know, obviously not just the data we were looking at, but, you know, the data that you've mentioned in this report and hope to gain, I think it will profit the whole community. So thank you.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Great. Well, thank you, Jen. I appreciate everything that you brought forward today, and just reiterating some of the comments from council around diversification, around the potential funding streams, and as Mayor Law just pointed out, the great work during the period of COVID and all the amount of, well, it really brought to light some of the gaps in our data bases and the follow through from the old CDAC days and how we might transfer that moving forward. So thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll be kept informed, and appreciate the time you took today.
Thanks, guys.
So moving on with, I skipped ahead on correspondence, but there is none anyway. So moving into presentation reports, I know that the business license and amendment bylaw, our report from Protective Services, and I'm going to assume that's Chief Baker. There he is, right on cue.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are going to talk a little bit about business license regulation this evening. I do have a short presentation for you. Just take one moment here and share my screen. Is that slideshow showing up for you folks?
It is, Brent, except it's not on the full screen.
Okay.
The beginning of slide, yeah, there you go. The beginning of slideshow, there it is.
All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So we just move a few things around here. So we have the current business license regulation bylaw was adopted in 2000. And there's been considerable growth in the business sector of Tofino, including the types of business and the way that businesses are managed. Tofino's business license regulatory system has been under review for several years. And while the review of Bylaw 858 continues, staff are requesting direction from council to bring forward amendments to the business license fees by way of a fee schedule amendment. The license fees for a portion of Class 9, which is the tourist commercial category, were increased in 2018. All of the other classes have not seen an increase since the bylaw was written in 2000. And staff would propose a structured and equation-based increases to catch up and keep up with inflation. If adopted, increased revenues will be reflected in the 2022 to 2026 budget process. The proposed increases, business class 9, the tourist commercial fees that were increased in 2018 would then increase by an additional 8% for the year 2022 and a further 2% for each year after that. All the other businesses that have not seen the increases would go up by 20% for the year 2022, an additional 20% for the year 2023, and then 2% for each year thereafter. I've got some examples of the proposed increases just so that we can have an idea of what this would look like across various sectors. So for instance, if we started with a liquor licensed food service, the current license fee for that area is $250. The initial 20% increase for next year would bring that to $300, followed by $360 in 2023, and then an additional 2% for 2024 would be $367. Professional contractor fees, currently $150, would go to $180, then $216, and finishing at $220 in 2024. Commercial retail, we have both for a smaller size, but the one that's highlighted there is for over 300 square feet as an example. Currently it's 400, go 480, 576, and 588. Just a few more here. Industrial manufacturing on the smaller side of things, currently 350, move to 420, 504, and then 514. Again, below that, you can see the larger industrial manufacturing sites. Transportation, marine, and land. This would be for taxis or water taxis. So right now they're at 150 per year, going to 180, 216, and 220. And then we've got the hotel resort campgrounds. The example I've highlighted here is for something that has no additional services. So no restaurants, no alcohol sales, no retail, just a straightforward hotel or campground. That would be currently 225, then 270, 324, and 330. And those types of businesses, they also do have an additional fee per room or campsite as well. If we look at that class 9.1 sector, the residential tourist accommodations, they're all at the same prices right now. So I've highlighted short-term rental as an example. So a one-room short-term rental is at $225 currently. That would become $243 with the 20% increase, $248, or sorry, that would be 8% increase. So 243 for 2022. 2023 would be 248. And again, the additional room rate on those is currently 75. That would move to 81 and then 83 on top of that. So at this point, our recommendations are that staff be authorized to draft an updated fee schedule for the business license regulation bylaw number 858/2000 to allow for new fees and charges to come into effect for the 2022 business license year. And that all business classes except for class 9 increase by 20% for the year 2022, 20% for the year 2023, and an additional 2% per year each year after. And that business class 9 tourist commercial be increased by 8% for the year 2022 and 2% for each year after. And that staff be authorized to continue the preparation of a new business license regulation to be introduced in 2022. If there are any questions, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here so I can see everybody. And there we go.
Great. Thank you, Brent. I saw Councillor Anderson and then Councillor McMaster.
Thanks, Brett. My question, I'm just wondering if under the food service category, are there different classes of food services? I'm just thinking some are, they're quite large with several square feet of seating area, and there's others that are takeouts, and then there's ones that are really small. And does the license fee apply equally to all those? I would be in support of creating a couple of classes. And also, I just sort of note that the food service area is one of the areas, at least the restaurants, have been hit particularly hard by COVID, and we might want to go easy on the increase in the next year anyways. Those are my comments, and the question was around if we have different classes, or should we look at creating them?
Excellent questions. So currently I've got the existing fee schedule in front of me. And so what I showed in the slides was just a few different sectors, some of the key ones, just to give an idea of some of the increases. So in the food services, for instance, this is class 1. We have class 1.1 through to 1.4. So there's non-licensed full service establishments. There is liquor licensed full service. Then there's non-licensed snack bars, which would be considered perhaps one of the takeout size vendors. And then we have liquor outlets that fall into that as well. So there are 4 fairly well-established categories that the businesses do fit fairly well into. And then again, as far as what businesses have done well and what may have faced challenges this year, I'm certainly in no position to be the judge or jury on that one at all. I don't have any reportings from any of the businesses. So this is something that has been on the horizon for quite a while. Clearly, we've not increased these since the year 2000. So with us maintaining administrative fees and the oversight process, I certainly think there's room in there for that. Obviously, it's open for discussion and council's direction, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to say where we should make those changes and that sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Thanks. That's all.
Hi, Brent. I don't have a problem with a fee increase, but for years we've talked about integrating our business licenses with our bylaws. And I know we've talked about short-term rentals having enough parking for tenants and guests and owners. Are we proposing to look at that? That's just one example. Are we proposing to look at that?
The short-term rentals having enough parking?
Yeah.
It is part of our license inspection process currently, where businesses are required to have enough parking spaces. Going through the pay parking review process, there has been a few individuals in the short-term rental categories that have expressed interest that they don't have enough parking for themselves, and many of those views were expressed by the on-site caretakers in that. Our reviews have so far from those individuals that express concern shown that there should be enough parking on the property, and they were calculated that there is. Some of those differences come down to whether the property owner is allowing them to use the parking, but that very much is taken into consideration for every business license inspection. It's right on the inspection checklist prior to getting that license.
I can assure you many VRs are not accounting for the tenants that are there and are not allowing them to park on the property. So that's why I would like to see it integrated into the business license, so it was a kind of heavy hand.
Yeah, there is a calculation format through the business license as well as the zoning bylaw that stipulates how many parking spaces they should have based on the number of rooms. What we can account for is if the one that is supposed to be set aside for the caretakers, if there's 2 or 3 people that have vehicles that live in the caretaker portion of the house, they may come with additional vehicles, and that's certainly where it gets tricky. But there is a formula in place right now for that process, and it's something that we're trying to work with the owners on as much as possible.
I'm not going to pursue this, but you know as well as I do, there's occasionally somebody, that tenant that gets forced onto the street because the guest brings 2 cars. That's fine. But there's some tenants that are parking on the street all the time, year round, because they're not allowed to park. So I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you. Were there any other questions or comments for Councillor Thick and then Mayor Law?
Yes, I also had a question more specific to the short-term rental, and I was wondering, Brent, maybe I'm confusing the fees with the bylaw, and I'm also interested in that. Just that, how do we, yeah, how do we make sure that these things are flushed together, I guess. But I would like personally to have a fuller discussion about the short-term rental aspect of the business license fees. And the reason I'm saying that is in looking at other smaller resort communities in BC, I see that there's a wide variety of, ways that this has been looked at and divided up. And so I just, for example, in Nelson, like there's actually a limit of one short-term rental license per, I don't know if it's per person or per owner, but there's a lot of things here that we seem to have a lot of difficulty with in our community. And I'm thinking in particular about the staff. And I'm wondering too, whether people who, I'm thinking in particular about short-term rentals, but is there a way that we could have, when you apply for your business license and you actually get your business license, that you sign some sort of a paper, an agreement that shows that you have read and understand what the rules are, whether it's, as Councillor McMaster says, whether it's to do with parking or noise or garbage cans or, any of these things that we've been wrestling with over the last few years. And so I'm just wondering if we can delve into this a little bit more, or is it something that we just express to you and you come back to us to have a further discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. I think tonight is mostly to talk about the fees. We do have a business license regulation bylaw that has been in the works. I have a draft that's ready to be reviewed by the legal team for the municipality. Something that has been in discussion between myself and the business license inspector is something in the application forms that indicates, by signing this, I agree to be operating my business in accordance with all municipal bylaws. And because of exactly what you're saying. So definitely I've received this message from council over the past, through various means of indicating that this is something that is important, but it's also something that comes up for us on a daily basis when we're working with business owners. And so it's important to have that. So right now, the goal was initially to have a complete business license regulation bylaw with amended fees. The concern is that because of the time that it takes to go through that process and meeting with council and taking into consideration all the pieces, that might not come into early in the new year. There was some views expressed by council during the first budget meeting that it would be nice to see an increase in the business license fees to meet inflation, but also to help with some of the costs in the bylaw department. Because we have increased costs there and the licenses have not gone up. So this was an opportunity to see if council is willing to consider a fee amendment at this time that would actually be in place for the 2022 business license cycle. And then very quickly, as possible, to have the rest of that bylaw, which will be rewritten, coming before council in the very near future.
Yeah, thank you. And can you just go, I read that and I appreciate your work on this. And I think we're starting to get closer to a better situation, I hope. But can you just explain why the rationale for the 20% and the 8%? I'm just, I understand that the fees haven't gone up, but can you just explain the numbers and why you are making that suggestion, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's quite common to have a 2% cost of inflation year by year. So when we just look at the fact that majority of those license fees have not gone up in the 20 years, we thought a 40% jump rate at this time to bring it up to where it should be was quite aggressive. And so taking that into consideration, we decided to suggest a phased approach and go 20% this year, 20% the following year, and then we would be back into that 2% per year to stay current with everything. And then for the class 9 section there, we're looking at, again, 2% since their most recent increase would put it at 8%, and then 2% after that to stay current as well too.
Yeah, no, I think it's very reasonable, and yeah, I just thank you for your work on this. And as I say, I would like to delve a little bit further into the short-term rental, just that aspect of the business license, the fees, the bylaw, all of that. So thank you.
Just thanks, Chief Baker, for your work and your presentation. I just have one question and one comment. My question is noting just in our first financial plan discussions, as you noted just briefly there a second ago, that we were looking at trying to cover some more bylaw costs. And how far will these fee increases go to help offset some of the increases in bylaw?
I haven't gone through each category to see specifically how many licenses under each category and what that cost would be. I'd have to sit down with the business license inspector. I think the differences would be fairly substantial when we're looking at a 20% increase. I don't want to throw out any guesses right now as to the specific numbers of that. We're still actually expecting several more business licenses to come in just for the 2021 period. So I wouldn't be able to have a full perspective of that, but it would be a noticeable difference.
That's great. It's great to see. And my comment was, even though that, ultimately it's a 40% increase over the next 2 years, I just did some quick calculations with the cost of inflation over at 2% for 20 years. And I just wanted to note that that 40% doesn't actually even reach parity for cost of inflation. So I think although it looks like it's a heavy hand, it's actually, it doesn't even match the original fees in 2000. And so, honestly, even just looking at that, I'd say if you're good with these numbers, I'm happy to support. But if you wanted to go a little higher, even just to match inflation, I would also support that, noting that these numbers don't quite reach inflation for that. So thank you for your work. That's my only comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. If there's no further comments or questions, I just had a quick, I'll ask my question first, Chief Baker. I just was curious in the category of liquor outlet, could you give me an example of what is defined as a liquor outlet?
I'll read right from the classification and fee schedule, if I may. Liquor outlet establishment where the providing and serving primarily alcohol to the public, including a pub, lounge, or beer and wine outlet.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it just seemed like a very low rate for that type of establishment. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the work on this. And I, as every councillor has indicated, I support this restructuring and getting up to parity over time, and be very comfortable supporting these recommendations as presented. And if there was a councillor that would like to move those recommendations, that would be wonderful.
I could do that.
Thank you.
Okay, I will move the recommendation that staff be authorized to draft an updated fee schedule for the business license regulation bylaw number 858/2000 to allow for new fees and charges to come into effect for the 2022 business license year, and that all business classes except class 9 increase by 20% for the year 2022, 20% for the year 2023, an additional 2% each year after. And that business class 9 tourism commercial be increased by 8% for the year 2022 and 2% per year for each year after. And that staff be authorized to continue the preparation of a new business license regulation bylaw to be introduced in 2022.
Okay, I have a seconder on that. Thank you, Mayor Law. Any questions, comments? Negative? Great. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your
On to
time.
Great. On to number 8.2, the Campbell Street Phase 3 Design Report from Public Spaces, Culture, and Visitor Initiatives. I see April up and ready to go. Thank you, April.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. Can everyone see the presentation screen?
Not yet.
Okay, bear with me. There we go. How about that?
Yep, got it now.
Okay, great. Okay, so tonight I'm going to review the Campbell Street Phase 3 design, which started in 2019, but was put on hold for a period of 2020 because of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and general uncertainty about the future. And this work was completed thanks to BC Rural Dividend Grant for the design. And because the district received this funding, we're able to complete the design, the detailed design for the full 2 blocks within the downtown core of Campbell so that the project may be shelf ready for future funding opportunities. So as the main commercial corridor in downtown Tofino, Campbell Street has been prioritized for street upgrades in order to support economic development, as well as to improve multimodal transportation and to enhance the public realm. And these improvements were first identified in the Tofino Downtown Vitalization Plan, which Council will be quite familiar with, and have recently been affirmed in the Tofino Multimodal Transportation Plan, which was completed in 2019. Campbell Street improvements have already been completed between 4th Street and 2nd Street, and the final phases of this project will complete the plan's overall vision for Campbell Street. For these specific 2 blocks, a couple of key objectives were identified in the Downtown Vitalization Plan. So in the westernmost block, as shown here, the plan identifies the opportunity presented by the spectacular views to the west. And this is a sketch that was in that original planning document, Downtown Vite Plan, of a lookout proposed just conceptually for the far end of Campbell Street. And in the eastern block of Campbell, the plan really recommended sidewalks. Of course, only one sidewalk exists on one side of the road, as well as narrowing the crossing distances to make this area, which is quite busy, safer for pedestrians. And Tofino's downtown vitalization is a key project that's identified in Tofino's resort development strategy. And that's the strategy that outlines the district's spending plans and priorities for resort municipality initiative fund investment. And the goal clearly being to create a vibrant downtown that enables visitors to move around easily within the village core. So multimodal transportation plan, there's really too many supporting components of this plan to list, but most notably are the directions to continue to enhance the streets in the village core, to invest in sidewalk infrastructure, a complete sidewalk network, as well as a connected bicycle network. And specifically mentioned is direction to provide bicycle parking in the public right-of-way and to provide covered bike parking at really a range of locations within the community, but specifically at this intersection, the First and Campbell intersection, as well as to integrate transit. And here are some pictures of what it used to look like downtown before the revitalization efforts happened. So there's a couple of images there of the past projects before, if you will, and then of course an after project as well. So the projects that have been completed to date were most significant was the 4th and Campbell project in 2013, followed by Campbell Street Phase 2 in 2014. And then the district took a bit of a shift and moved over to Main Street, where a bit of a lighter touch was completed there, knowing that the district did not have the resources to complete all of the underground infrastructure that would be required. But we didn't want to wait, indefinitely to make improvements to the pedestrian infrastructure along that street. So 3 phases there in 2016, 17, and 2018. So moving on to this project. So I've got a number of slides, and some of them are specific to the trees that were mentioned during the public comment section as well. So we'll get to those later on. But this is one of the blocks, and then I'll focus on the next block separately, just because it's a lot to look at on the screen. So as in the previous phases of Campbell Street, the district has been engaging with Ministry of Transportation throughout the design process. This block here, which is the block from 2nd Street, so largely dominated by the Co-op grocery store and Family Fashions building over there. It is within the highway for right-of-way. And so the next block is not within the highway for right-of-way. And so that brings a few differences. So we have been engaging with the ministry throughout the design process, and they've been very supportive to date. It's undergoing final review right now. This plan here shows sidewalks on both sides and bike lanes on both sides. And this is consistent with the previous 2 blocks of improvement. Currently, there is only a narrow, very poor condition. If you've ever tried to push your shopping cart down the section in front of the co-op, the sidewalk is really in need of replacement. And there is no sidewalk at all on this other side here. There's increased street parking on both sides in this block. And currently there is no parking on the west side of 2nd Street, just west of, Campbell Street, just west of 2nd. So this section here, I think, can you see my mouse if I'm moving it around the screen? I see now. Yeah. Perfect, great. So I'll try and refer to things that way. And that's due to, there's some challenging topography here with a rock bluff, and then as well as some drainage challenges. And the sight lines are not great coming around this corner. And so there is no parking there currently, and none is recommended, and none has been included in that particular section of the design. And the new stormwater infrastructure is shown by this dark black here with the D for drainage. So that's installed or proposed to be installed as well. And this is that same block shown in cross section. So you can see here, there is a 2-meter sidewalk. So that's a fairly wide sidewalk, again, consistent with other sections of the plan. This building that's sort of referenced there with the vertical post, I think you can see is referring to the co-op grocery store frontage there. And then there's a 1.55 meter sort of strip for, car door swings, bike racks, streetscaping, that type of thing, allowing people to get in and out of the vehicle. And then a parking lane, a bike lane, a drive lane, and then much the same on the other side of the street, but a slightly narrower sidewalk for what we would call the CIBC schooner side of that block. And within that block is a, oh, sorry, if I didn't skip ahead here. I'll go back to that slide. So within that block is a transit facility is proposed, and that would support both the seasonal shuttle, but also the new Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Transit Service, regional transit service that is supposed to get underway in 2022. So that would support that. Sorry, I got out of order with my slides there. So Campbell Street here. So this is the western terminus, and it's the second block. So this is not within the highway right of way, and so that provides the district with a little more freedom to not build everything to a highway standard necessarily. At the intersection here, so I'll just talk a little bit about this intersection. So this, just to orient everyone, is the the Co-op grocery store, the CIBC corner, the post office corner, and then the sort of Driftwood Gifts corner over here. So proposed are mountable curbs at the intersection. So that's very similar to the intersection at 4th and Campbell. And these are a measure to increase pedestrian safety by narrowing the crossing distance while still allowing large vehicles to make those turns. The transit stop over here, with shelter at the southeast corner, and then covered bike parking at the northeast corner. So that's over there. And then EV charging stations are shown just kind of over here. Sorry. EV charging stations are just shown over here. There's a large turnaround at the end to accommodate large vehicles and a scenic viewpoint right at the end here. While some feedback that was received wanted this to be larger and even come down the slope with tiered seating and that type of thing, we did undertake some geotechnical testing as part of the design process, and the short answer is it's not that great over here. The news is not good, and so there are some poor subsoil conditions at the end of the road, which is consistent with what we found in other areas of the community. As things were filled, often there was a lot of organic material in there, so it's not thought that coming down the slope there would be a measure that could be done inexpensively. And the plan has considered the adjacent private development, which is right here, and it shows a future pedestrian connection to the waterfront. And the district is currently working with the applicant on a proposed pedestrian connection to the foreshore and the future harborfront walkway. Also planned is new stormwater infrastructure, which is currently either undersized, in poor repair, or in many cases non-existent in this block. And here's a bit of a closer look at the scenic viewpoint, which is right here. And this is shown in a rendering of what that could look like there, looking out over towards Wickeninish Island. And this is again just a cutaway showing the viewpoint there. So public engagement was planned for the spring of 2020, but was paused due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Engagement on the 50% design was completed in the spring of 2021. It was one of the first projects that utilized the district's new Tla-o-qui-aht engagement platform. And to bring awareness, and because everyone was trapped in that post office line, we put a large billboard facing the post office with sort of a captive audience there with images of the proposed investments or improvements, and directing people to the website, Tla-o-qui-aht there with the QR code for more detailed information. So we did get some good engagement on the 50% design, and staff did meet with a number of property owners in the project area and walked them through the proposed changes as well. And there is an engagement summary document that is included in the package as Appendix 3 to the staff report. And the top themes that we heard were traffic and parking, not surprisingly, and tree retention, which will be addressed in further detail in the next few slides. So turning movements, turning movements were looked at for all of the intersections and making sure things could navigate the end of the western terminus there, the turnaround. But what is sort of the most, we heard the most about was the removal or proposed removal of the right turn lane from Campbell Street to First Street. So again, this is the co-op corner here. This is the existing condition and how vehicles make that turn, or large vehicles. So these are large trucks. And then this is in the proposed new condition with you can see the large bump outs there and the removal of that right turn lane. So trucks certainly could safely navigate. Right now, vehicles swing completely out into the opposite lane, the largest trucks. So this is like a Cisco truck or a co-op grocery truck, which does not actually, the co-op truck does not use this access. It uses the parking lot access. But right now they move right out into the other lane before making the turn. And in the new condition, they would still, as they approach, swing out, but it would actually be the smaller truck that may roll over. And again, this is very similar to the condition in front of Wolf and the Fog Guy Grocery at the 4th and Campbell corner, which seems to function fairly well. And while this configuration does remove the right turn lane, it is providing other amenities which are more pedestrian friendly, including the on-street parking, the large bump outs, sidewalks, bike lanes, etc. And this is a field sketch, but it does really illustrate the type of traffic that was seen on this corner. And so there was a traffic count that was done for about 8 hours, and it was on June 29th, which is approaching summer, fairly high season, fairly busy. And at that time, sort of throughout the peak hours of the day, there was only one articulated truck that made that maneuver. There were 374 vehicles that made that right turn, while there were over 1,000 pedestrians that made the crossing right there. So that shows how this intersection is being used currently. And in regards to parking, there are currently, of course, some of it is informal, so it's hard to get an exact number, but approximately 41 existing parking spaces within the 2 blocks. And the proposed streetscape design does reconfigure parking, but retains this number with the possibility for an additional 1 to 3 spaces. Trees. So the design does seek to minimize impact to existing trees and vegetation. However, it is anticipated that in order to achieve all of the modes of transportation, bike lanes, sidewalks, vehicle drive lane that are proposed, then there is a cluster of trees that would be required to be removed in order to do so. In the next couple of slides, I'll walk through a number of options that were looked at to potentially retain these trees, but certainly there are trade-offs. It's worth noting on this slide the location of the limit of the highway right-of-way, which is shown by this yellow line here. And so you can see that what currently exists is significantly into the road right-of-way there. And this is the CIBC, and this is that little rock wall there, and this is sort of informal parking. So this is proposed to be a transit stop, and I'll walk through some of the other options there. It's also worth noting that as part of the project, 17 new trees are proposed to be planted. At the 50% design stage, there were a handful of other trees that were thought to potentially require removal, but after a few relatively minor design changes are believed to be able to be retained. And so this is just a street view version of the clump of trees that we're talking about. So I'm sure these are familiar to everyone there. And there's that rock wall. So these are a number of alternative options, and I'll just sort of walk everyone through them, starting at the top here. So option 1 retains this tree bluff. So you can see that this is the tree bluff here, and those trees are shown. Hopefully that's large enough for everyone to see. It retains the bike lane, a narrow sidewalk, and parking on the grocery store side, but no sidewalk or parking on the CIBC side. And then option 2 retains the tree bluff with wide sidewalks on both sides, but no bike lanes. And then option 3, which is an interesting option, routes a narrow sidewalk to the rear of the bluff. And so some tree removal would still be required, but the impact on the critical root zone of these trees here on the bluff is really, it's unknown. The work would have to be undertaken with an arborist on site during excavation, and any impact on the roots potentially could create a future danger tree. And of course, it's a busy area of downtown. So it may result in the eventual removal of the trees despite efforts to save. We know, just from looking visually that there's minimal roots on this side, on the road side. So presumably the roots are really hanging on at the back side here. And the trade-off for this one here too is that the grade of this sidewalk would be unlikely to meet accessible standards because it would be somewhat steeper as it has to come up in behind the bluff there. And all of these options eliminate the landscaping, any landscaping or public realm amenities such as benches, bike racks along the stretch, but they do endeavor to retain this rock bluff with the trees. So it is a trade-off between retaining trees and those elements of rural character that they provide, and of course the merit and environmental value of the trees themselves. But these other modes of transportation, it's difficult to fit them in the road right of way without taking up the full width of the road right of way. And staff is not looking for a decision from council on this, but it would be helpful at the end of the presentation to have a sense from council on what direction is supported. And project funding, so the project is not currently funded, so it's not happening tomorrow, but staff does continue to pursue grant funding to see this project happen. And this is the total project cost, and that includes a substantial contingency. Right now, RMI is a significant project funder. The district does have a Campbell Street Reserve Fund, which is funding that was obtained through past private development in this area, and it is held in reserve. But we are still looking for a significant amount of funding to make this project happen, and staff will continue to update council through the financial plan process on this. So right now it's tentatively planned for 2023, but of course that is contingent on funding. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to hear any feedback or questions from council at this time. Perhaps I'll stop sharing my screen and that,
Yes, thanks, April, yeah.
okay.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. Is there, I'm sure there are questions from council. Mayor Law and Councillor Thick. And I certainly will have some as well. Go ahead, Mayor Law.
Sure, certainly. Thanks. Thanks so much for the presentation and all your work on this. I think it's going to be a great, if we can get it funded and done, I think it's going to be a great project to see through. Just a couple of you wanted some feedback. I do very much appreciate the 17 new trees included and the retention of the parking. In my preference personally would be, the 1 to 3 extra parking spaces. I'd prefer to see, some retention of the trees and Rock Bluff. I think that we'd probably lose a couple parking spaces out of that. And just to give you a little background, I met with a councillor from Colwood just the other day. We met and discussed some of the interesting things that Colwood is doing, and they are really looking at moving towards site adaptive development in all of their developments. And so I looking at the Rock Bluff and the trees that are there, I think option 3 does appeal to me. It seems a good compromise, and it does start to recognize the way that municipalities across the province are starting to look at site adaptive and retaining some rock bluffs and trees and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at. I'd like to see that, and again, I do very much appreciate the tree planting. If we're going to cut some down, then certainly we'd like to plant more. Really, that's all. And then one other question. I guess the answer is no, but if we have approximately 50%, funds already, is it possible, if we don't get grants, to move ahead with at least part of this, or does it all have to be done at the same time? Just a little feedback on that. That's it for me.
Through the chair, a phased construction is possible. There is an increased cost to that, and we did look at that. So about a 20% increase overall in the project cost, because the contractor does have to mobilize twice. But it is an option.
Councillor Thick, I had you up next.
Yeah, thank you, April, for your presentation. And just as Mayor Law noted, there's a lot of work on this project and a lot of moving pieces, I'm sure. I had a comment or a question, I suppose, about that western terminus of Campbell. And it's hard for me to tell from the diagrams, but are we suggesting that that's a one-way, or is a one-lane? It would become a one-lane street? I'm just not 100% sure.
Good question. No, through the chair, it's not a one-lane street, but it is a narrower roadway than would be constructed or that has been constructed elsewhere on Campbell. And that is a traffic calming measure. It is a dead-end road, so presumably there is no through traffic. So it's a narrow roadway, but it's not by any means one way.
Okay, thanks. And so how, like with all the houses and the hotel at the end of the road, and I don't know if there's B&Bs or short-term rentals, but what number of cars might live or use that portion of the road as an access point? The western terminus I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I don't know if I can completely answer that question. We did do traffic counts, and I can identify the number of parking spaces that are in the western terminus block, but it's hard to say how many on a day-to-day basis are making their way through. I think the traffic count slide did list some numbers there.
Yeah. I guess I'm feeling a bit concerned about, is there like 40 units at the Duffin the Duffin Motel, is there 40 units? And then there's, I don't know, like 10 houses that access. I mean, could it be 100 cars a day that would be utilizing that portion of the road? And then you add all the people who want to get to the lookout. So I'm just thinking, like, is it realistic for us to really think about that narrow road? I'm just wondering, with the number of people who need that road to access, and the narrowness of that road, I don't know. I guess I see accidents about to happen, but that's one of my questions, is that section of the road, how many people are using that as access, and is it realistic to think about that narrow road being a safe passage?
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, okay, that's one thing. And then I am concerned about the bump outs there and Campbell, as I think you noted in the report. There was quite a few comments about that. And I mean, I'm sure from an engineer's point of view, it seems like it makes good sense, because it reduces I think you had said in previous presentations that, it reduces the distance that people walk. But I see that area a little bit as a gray zone, when you think, oh, a car or a truck could navigate over it, but also people might be standing there. So I just see those bump outs as a bit of a gray area. And I wonder too, are we making the wise choice there? Because there's just so many people on foot, and now more and more cars. So I just raised that question. I think it was raised by several people in the public comment. And the only other thing I was thinking about too was, and I'm sure the engineers and you have thought about this, but I just see so many motorhomes, and I'm wondering, is it also the distance of the width of the road? I think it was 3.8 meters. The numbers were really small, but the width of the road, just as you approach the co-op there, could there be a problem there with motorhomes, or the size of the bus that we're anticipating might be coming there? Is it, again, realistic that the road is wide enough to accommodate the kinds of motorhomes, the bigger motorhomes that we're seeing, and the buses that we anticipate coming to those points? Thank you.
Great. I see Councillor Anderson, you've got a hand waving up there.
Yes, thank you. I've had quite a few comments. Most of them have been covered. I'm a little bit concerned, I guess, around the possible loss of some permit parking. Of course, we always hear in our council meetings about the importance of permit parking for the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation and other users of permit parking. So I'm hoping that we at least have a new permit parking in place before we remove all the permit parking there, or we have a plan around that. I had a question around the bicycle lane, sort of not continuing past First Street to the terminus. And let's start there. And then I got a couple other comments.
Thank you. So the bicycle lane, does not continue through into the far block, but is thought that the level of traffic is much less there because the destination is really only that block and the end. And the sidewalks in that block are very, very wide. The road is designed to be a slower road, so more friendly for bikes and vehicles to be commingling, if you will. And the sidewalks are very, very wide. There's also a number of sort of end of trip facilities at the intersection, so covered bike parking, e-bike charging as well. And so it's thought that with the main destination being the services at that intersection, be the grocery store, post office, bank, that type of thing, that most people will park their bike there and then move about and do their activities from there. So yeah, there is not a separate bike lane through the second block.
Okay. My comment on the tree retention is that I prefer the third option as well, moving the sidewalk around and keeping the bike lane. One of the things I'm wondering about, what is considered a significant tree, if it's determined by age, do we have any sort of arborists looking at them to make sure that they're in healthy condition and that they're going to last before we're saving a tree that may end up coming out due to being rotten in the middle or something like that. So I don't need an answer on those ones, but those are my comments. The water dispensaries that we've put out near my grocery store on the highway is quite well used. So I'm hoping that the design might incorporate something at that end of town as well for water dispensaries, because I'd like to see the district moving towards the elimination of plastic water bottles. The bump outs, I'm not concerned about the bump outs in the public comments. Those are traffic calming measures, actually make the road safer and traffic slow down. I find that they work between 4th Street and 2nd, and that there's actually more speeding between, once you go from 2nd to 1st Street along Campbell, people actually move fairly fast along that section. And so I'm glad to see that they're incorporated to help slow traffic down. And then my last comment is on the repair and maintenance of pavers. I've noticed in the first phases that when they've replaced hydro poles, they move pavers around them, and then they haven't been replaced properly. So I'm hoping that we'll either get on that a little bit more, hopefully before 2023, but maybe have solutions incorporated into the design when that happens in the future as well. So that's all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. I see Councillor McMaster's hand up as well.
Yeah, my question was that with regard to the rock bluffs, I tend to prefer option 3, but before I would really agree to that, I'd want to see the grades we were dealing with for the mobility challenge. Then the other thought was, if it was retained, is there enough room to create a bit of a picnic site on the bluff, which would be a great people watching spot with shade and everything else? That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. I do have a few comments, and first of all, to thank you, April. I know the magnitude of this type of project and the work that goes into it is phenomenal, as you have on all phases between Main and Campbell Street. So I really wanted to thank you around that. In terms of, I'll just start in the order that I had my notes in, is around the Campbell and First Street with the bump outs. I don't have concerns either. I think the direction that we've been looking at with our multimodal transportation plan and a more active transportation system, specifically for the downtown, but all over the district. I think this fits in very nicely with that and all the amenities that you have put into there between bike lanes, the larger sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very supportive of that as well. And I think it'll pay dividends in the long term. These types of actions do take time to create that culture, and we're providing the infrastructure to move that forward. So I do think it will take time for that to come into play, but in the long term, I think we'll be successful. One of the other, I just had a quick question around the turnaround at the Western Terminus, and I'm sure it's been articulated, and just in terms of emergency vehicle, the radius in terms of turnaround in there. I suspect it's been looked at, but I just thought I'd ask. I'll ask that, and then I'll move on to more in a second.
Yes.
So I see you nodding, so I think you've answered it.
Yeah, large. Thank you, Councillor Sear. Large vehicles have been considered through that turnaround. not just, large fire truck, but also large delivery vehicles. The Cisco truck does deliver to the businesses down at the end there. So the turning movements of those vehicles have been considered in that radius.
Thank you. And then in terms of feedback around the retention of the bluff and the option 3, my gut reaction is that's the one that appealed to me most. I would need to really, it was very small print, and I had to think about it a little more. And I echo the concerns of Councillor McMaster in terms of gradient, and I don't know what abilities there are to lessen or those inclines on there. I have no idea, but would certainly be a concern, of course, around there. And then you did point out in terms of I suspect the holding ground for the root structure is going to be on the back end there. And so obviously, until we have further information about how viable that option is, but moving forward, that would be in terms of feedback, that would be the option that initially appealed the most with the limited information that we had. I did have, in terms of the funding, I know that you're incredibly creative and have been over the last decade, I would say, in securing that. So I'm pretty confident in your ability to come up with that grant portion of it. The part that has always been a concern is in terms of the long-term maintenance, and we are adding infrastructure once again, and that the commitment to the long-term maintenance and where that funding typically has come from taxation, and once again to be looking if there are alternatives to that long-term maintenance and infrastructure over time. So that would be my comments regarding that.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. And unfortunately, operations and maintenance costs are no longer eligible funding or projects under the expenses, under the RMI program, which is, we did used to, the district was able to fund a portion of that in the past, but that changed in 2014, I believe. In terms of other non-taxation funding sources, I think that's something that Council will want to discuss in the future, and whether there's other user fees perhaps collected in some way, downtown roads, I don't know, that may be able to offset some of those costs, but I think that'll be a further discussion.
Yeah, and I thought just with parking revenues and with the downtown parking plan moving forward, there are some options out there, but just wanted to flag that. If there are no other comments, I just really wanted to thank you again. The scope of this project is wonderful, and the amount of work that goes into it. So seeing no further hands, Councillor Thick, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to add on, but just to also put my hat on the ring for the option 3, I think I really appreciated Mayor Law's comments about the adaptive nature that I think is good when we're talking about trees. And I think, yeah, I just agree with the points that other councillors have raised regarding that area. And just secondly, just from a higher level thing, I'm not trying, when I said, the width of the road, you've heard me say this before, but I'm actually not in favor of accommodating more motorhomes. So I just wanted to be clear that my question wasn't so that we could have more motorhomes past 4th and Campbell. My preference would be to have no motorhomes past 4th and Campbell. So just saying that, emergency vehicles, but, not actually bending over backwards to make those motorhomes fit in our downtown core is something, it's just, that's not important to me. So just wanted to make sure that I was saying that in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. I thought you were referring to lots of tour buses going down there and stuff. I thought that's what you were concerned about, the widths there for those. No, thank you. I appreciate your comments. You've been consistent in those over time. So thank you again, April. Appreciate once again all the work on this, and we might even be hearing from you, I suspect, a little later on here. Great. So I don't know if council would, I'd like to recommend before we move into community sustainability's budget and project presentation, I need a 2-minute break here if that would be acceptable to all, and if we can reconvene at 6 o'clock, that would be wonderful. Thank you. just wait for Mayor Law. He's still in the bathroom, so we'll just wait till he gets back. Great, we've got everyone back. Moving on with the agenda onto 8.3 is the 2022 to 2026 Department Budget and Projects Presentation Report from Community Sustainability. I'm gonna guess Aaron is somewhere in the house.
Hello, good evening. I can, I'll just share my screen and we can get going here. Okay, there we go. I'm assuming everybody can see the title screen for the report. Today, I'll be presenting the long-awaited draft financial plan for community sustainability. I'm sorry, I'm a couple of weeks late. I will go through it section by section, and maybe I'll stop at the end of each section for any questions from council. So, community sustainability, I'll just give a brief overview for those of us on the at the meeting who are not aware of what we do. We take care of planning and development, which includes things like development permits, rezoning applications, subdivision approvals. We also incorporate the building inspection service, so that would be building permits and inspections, and take care of things like maps and zoning. We also have a recreation department that takes care of community programming for recreation. And we have an emergency planning section that's involved largely with public education, larger projects, strategies and plans, as well as actual operational needs related to emergencies. The operating budget highlights, just wanted to, in terms of planning, particularly that our development revenue is an estimate. It's an educated guess every year about what type of revenue we're going to be bringing in. It's changed a little bit in the last year as we've adopted new fees. Again, with those fees are expected to support the cost of the new planning position to about 90%. We don't have any significant increases in annual expenditures over the life of 2022 to 2026, and it varies a little bit year to year just based on what projects we're doing when. So in terms of development revenue, we can see again a fairly consistent estimate over the next 5 years. It tends to be more accurate the closer you are to the current year. So 2022 will be closer to 74,000 than perhaps 2023 to 2026 will be, and we update that every year. So based on what we're seeing in terms of interest from developers, state of the economy, all those kind of things factor into our estimations. We have in their grants, donations, and contributions, we have $25,000 this year. I'm just going to flip back to my financial plan just to give council an idea of what those are. Sorry, I just got ahead of myself there. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you to myself. The $25,000 in grants and and contributions are related to one of the project sheets for the mobile population census, and that number represents the revenue we're expecting from other agencies. We can see our staffing, office administration costs are largely the same year to year. And then we can see again our planning projects. We have a number of projects in 2022 scheduled. Some of these are projects that we've brought forward from previous years, and then there's some new projects this year, and I'll get into those in the project sheets themselves. What we're seeing as you go through the various years from 2022 to 2026 is a planning department that's starting to schedule in our projects. So this year it'll be zoning. That'll be followed up in years to come with reviewing our integrated community sustainability plan, and then moving back into some research, so monitoring our OCP, doing a housing needs assessment, and then back into an OCP planning project. So you're starting to see that come through in that line itself.
Aaron, sorry to interrupt you, but can you just go into slideshow mode?
Am I back out again?
Yeah.
Oh, that could happen there. There you go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good.
Thanks. Sorry. So that was, does council need me to go through this line, these items again, or are you comfortable with me moving forward?
Unless there's no objection, I think you're good to go.
Great. So the large project in 2022 and moving into 2023 is the Mckenzie Beach Comprehensive Development Strategy. And this is the largest item or plan in process that I've brought forward to council in my time at the District of Tofino. This is intended to deal with what planning staff are seeing as an emerging issue between Helson Drive and Mckenzie Beach Road. So we have a number of development applications that are anywhere from building permit to development permit to zoning to subdivision stages in and around this area. So moving from south to north, we have Mckenzie Beach Resort, which is currently under a development permit, and potentially moving forward to building permit for a relatively large resort at the end of Helson Drive that's currently zoned for that. We have development interest in and around the Crabapple, what's known as the Crabapple property. We have the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation campground currently under construction at the corner. And we have understanding that that there may be future development on the Tinwis property. We're also talking to Mckenzie Beach Resort. We've recently updated or downzoned, or in the process of downzoning that property, and we're also in discussions about other portions of that property. We have had early conversations about the properties also on the other side of Mckenzie Beach Road, and actually up as far as Industrial Way. So there's a lot of stuff happening there, and whether we plan for it or we don't, a lot of this development may happen. And what I'd like to do and what I hope to do is to get ahead of that. So to understand what we're going to need if these projects come forward in terms of transportation network, in terms of understanding what potentially the water needs are or the sewer needs, and about where that density can live on that property. And so this project would not just be planning, it'd have a fairly large engineering component as well. And it's not intended to say exactly what's going to happen there, but at least give us understanding if we have an application come into to the department, we know what to be asking for in terms of, do we need a chunk of that land available for a road or for looping or sewer? And if we do this incrementally, there may be opportunities that are lost, and we will be more responsive than proactive. Something this large dwarfs our OCP budget that we recently did. Currently in our OCP, this is not an area that's identified as an area for future development. But that being said, there's a lot of demand out there, and there's a lot of development rights that have been handed over decades and decades ago. So if this was to move forward, it would result in updating the official community plan. At this point, it's a District of Tofino funded program. I would be reaching out to other organizations, businesses, governments to consider a partnership on this, but this is where we're at today. So I understand it's a large project, but I just wanted to inform council about why we're even thinking about this. The mobile population census is a significantly smaller project. This project is intended to support the data that we receive from the census and help us plan for our community. So right now we have a census that's always feels a little bit out of date, a couple of years old, and we're not so sure that it gives us the information that we need in terms of our shadow population. So staff are proposing to work with partners, and those partners being the District of Tofino, Tourism Tofino, the Tla-o-qui-aht Biosphere Trust, and the Tofino Housing Corporation to develop what we're calling a mobile population census, and that would be using big data and technology to try to further understand our populations. And so to begin with, we'd be looking at three prime populations. We're looking at the permanent resident population, a shadow population, and then our visitor information. That is the first thing we want to answer, and probably the basis of our first first mobile population census. In years to come, and depending on what it looks like for costing, maybe this is something that can happen every 2 to 3 years. At this point, we have it scheduled for every 5 years. We'd be looking to maybe answer some more questions, but right now, we still don't know the right questions to ask. The providers that I've spoken to so far are just starting to get used to working with municipalities. These are primary tools that have been used by commercial enterprises to figure out what's happening in markets. So to begin with, we'd have a number on populations, and then potentially as well as some demographic information on that. In the future, we may be looking at how these various populations move about, even in fine-grained as neighborhood to neighborhood and times. But for now, it's just going to be the population. So excited about that. And again, it's a regional project, so our contributions will be at 71%, and then for our portion is 29%, and it would begin early in 2022 and help inform the OCP process, housing needs assessment, infrastructure planning, all of those type of projects. The Integrated Community Sustainability Plan refresh. So this is, again, a little bit down the line in 2024. We expect to do this largely in-house and base it off our existing Integrated Community Sustainability Plan process. The Integrated Community Sustainability Plan is also known in Tofino as our Vision to Action Plan, or V2A. And this is a plan that speaks to the sustainability or resiliency of the community and sits above many of the plans and the bylaws that we work on, but giving them some direction. So it would influence future OCPs, future subdivision development bylaws, those types of plans. Housing needs assessment report. This is something that now is legislatively required every 5 years. We're in the midst of our second housing needs assessment that I expect council will be able to review in the next month or so. In 2025, we'll have to do it again, and it will lead into an OCP in 2026. Because of the work that we've done on this housing needs assessment, we'll have a template for doing this going forward. So again, we think we can do this in-house, and there may at that time be potentially grants available for this type of work. There were at this time around, and so obviously if that is available in 2025, it's something that staff would be interested in pursuing. Right. So in 2026, we're looking at another official community plan update. This will be in-house. It'll build on the housing needs assessment. It will build on the mobile population census. It will build on our OCP monitoring project, which is now underway, and on the integrated community sustainability plan. And so the idea being that we just get on a bit of a Ferris wheel of planning fun, and then following the OCP plan update, not on this plan, will be a zoning bylaw update, and hopefully just make these things boring. I think that's it for planning. So happy to take any questions or comments, and I'll stop sharing at this time and open up again afterwards.
Great. Was there, for the first section here, is any questions for Aaron? Councillor Anderson? And then Mayor Law.
Yeah, I'm sort of balking at the the cost of the Mckenzie Beach planning process. Probably other councillors are as well. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that there was potential funding. I'm just wondering if maybe the province might be one of those potential funders of that, and what sort of contributions might we expect from any developers interested in the area? Any comments on that, or is it a bit early to say?
It's really early to say. It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing. We can't ask developers for money. It's awkward. So we can't ask for money before they're going to be developing, and even if they do develop, it's a tough conversation to have. And generally, they're only interested in their portion of land. So that's kind of the point where we're kind of doing incrementally, and we don't have an overall plan. So asking the developer to do the planning work that we have to do at the time of their development, it kind of is counter to this whole idea. And I haven't explored at all with any of the potential partners cost sharing. Something that if council's interested in this project, I'll spend some more time knocking on doors and asking about that. But in the end, it's one of those projects that benefits us mostly as a community. It's us trying to figure this out, understanding that development is most likely going to occur there.
Thanks.
I think it was Mayor Law. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Rogers. This I just have a quick comment follow up on the Mckenzie Beach comprehensive development strategy. I do think it's incredibly important. I think this is going to be, a lot of development, as you say, is going to go on here, especially TFN lands, and I really would like to get ahead of that. But what is the difference between the budget? You said it dwarfs the current budget, the 300K. What is the difference? And then I have just one more comment after that.
Yeah, so I think, for last OCP, and I'm gonna pull a number out of the air here, but I believe it was around, oh my goodness, I want to say it was around $70,000 ish. So in that range, anyways, and that was for the whole community. Again, we looked at, using the data that we had and setting that aside. That's what it was. But when we look about the amount of development that we're talking about that's on the cusp there, and the thing with the environmental sensitivity, or the stuff we have to think about reconciliation, our transportation issues, servicing, it just adds up to a pretty massive plan. It's a pretty big area. And so it would be similar to the local area plans that we've done in the past, but with actual resources behind them and driven by the district rather than a developer. So this would be the district saying, here's what we have, here's what we can do, and here's, if you want to develop it, what your share of this development is going to be. So we're going to, require, road dedication here. We're going to require, this type of water storage, here, and understanding that as we go forward, so that developers, if they are going to be there, have a really clear idea of what's going to happen. And for us as a community, know that in the end, we're going to get something that we've planned and that supports, the district, not just a developer. So if we do this incrementally, and the easy one to talk about is roads. If we're working with developers and we decide that we need a second way to access that, like we want to connect up to Cedarwood Road at the end of Crystal Cove, where does that road go? And if we don't know, we're going to have a zigzag line as we go along. And again, it's not a terrible thing, but it probably doesn't meet all of our needs. These are the type plans we may see more of in the future too, depending on where we're looking at development. But at this point, we've kind of developed off Highway 4, along Highway 4. But in terms of, again, going back to transportation, at some point we're going to have to think about that second access, this, a different way for people to move around, and this is kind of the beginning of that.
Sure. And just to follow up, and then I'll comment, another comment, follow up on that. It'd be great, depending on the will of council going forward about this comprehensive development strategy is to, you know, we've been encouraged to reach out to the ministry, and maybe this is somewhere we can actually, you know, leverage our council voices, depending on the will of council. So just going forward, be good to keep very much in contact and see if we can work with you there. The other thing is the population census. We just had, of course, a presentation from Jen Dart, and I noted that the lack of data about, you know, especially the shadow population. And I just wondered, with that population census, is there an option to dovetail with the Chamber of Commerce on their data collection as well? I'm just thinking maybe, you know, if you're both complementing each other in that specific data, might be something. Just if I'm sure you're in the loop, but just want to make that make that point. Thank you very much for your presentation so far.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just a quick. I didn't see any other councillors' hands up. Yeah, just a quick comment. You're right, Mr. Rogers. The 300,000 did make us all gasp. I could see a collective gasp in the room, but recognizing the importance of what you've outlined for the project, and I'm sure there will be further conversation. If there is no other questions from councillors, I don't see any hands up. If you feel free to proceed.
Thank you. Okay, moving into recreation.
Excuse me, Aaron.
well-
Just once again, if you wanted the full screen on your presentation, we're in the. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. It's been a while since I've presented to council, and I've lost all my skills. Okay, moving into recreation. Some highlights from the recreation budget. We're going to get new tires on the van every 5 years. That's to support the safe movement of our recreation participants around the community and to places like Mount Washington. We have a little bit higher fees in 2022 to 2023 that are generated from the development of a strategic plan for recreation. And again, our grants vary year to year, and we don't have a lot of times with the recreation type grants, we don't understand and truly what's happening into the year that it's actually happening in. And so it's a little bit more difficult to estimate in the following 4 years. We don't have a lot of miscellaneous revenue coming into the department. We have, again, some grant revenues coming in for various things. The large items in 2022 are, I believe, related to primarily to the youth program and an RBC grant that has moved forward years that we expect to just hopefully finish off spending in 2022. We make a little bit of money from our van, but it's one of those services that it's more of a service than a place where we recover costs from. You can see our program revenue stays fairly steady year to year, and again, always more accurate in the year that we're the next year, so in 2022. Our staffing, office and admin stays relatively stable through 2022 to 2026. We're not expecting any new employees. We have expenses coming from recreation van. Again, these are largely related to just the ongoing maintenance and safety tests, and then tires once in a while, or not once in a while, every 5 years. We have our program expenses, which stay again fairly stable. We have the gym expenses, which is what we use to support the Wickaninnish Community School to help keep that facility open and usable by residents of Tofino. Lately, it's been COVID, we've had a limited access to it. We're working every day to increase that access and try to broaden the types of people that can use that facility, and when they can, understanding it's our only physical recreation space that's available to us. And then you can see that again, in our net from property taxation stays fairly stable through the years. We have a couple of projects to discuss today. We have the community hall foyer upgrade. This is related to a shift in how we are staffing. So for the last year or so, we've had someone working out, or not someone, we've had a recreation programmer one working out of the community hall. That's allowed us to keep an eye on the facility, which has been really actually helpful for minor maintenance, cleaning. It's also provided a significant amount of benefit in providing a face and an opportunity for our residents who are taking advantage of recreation programs to be able to talk to the district and in primarily recreation in the moment. So if they have a concern, they can bring it up, and so it's allow us to have a lot more a higher level of service. And it's also, I think, offered. It's just offered an ear for people to talk to. So we've been really happy with that. So what we'd like to do, that's a long story, is to request to actually turn that service, provide some space, so a reception desk and set up some storage cubbies for people to put their shoes and gear, a printer, and a plant. So this is something that we're all pretty excited about, and will allow us, as long as with our temporary facility attendant, to provide more in-person type service to the community. We have a recreation strategic plan planned for 2022 and 2023. This is, I think, a project that council is familiar with. It's the partner to a park strategic plan, and the idea would be to, take a look at what we have, what the community is interested in doing. So a lot of public consultation, and lay out a 10-year plan for how we get there. We've done a pretty good job of the current plan that we currently operate under, with the exception of a large facility, but we've met a lot of the smaller goals over the last 10 years, and it would be nice to get back to the community, hear what they have to say, and refresh that. Community hall upgrades. This one is, we pushed this a year into 2022. It has to start with hydro because we're again, I think as council has been aware of, we're out of power up at the community hall, and we understand that we're not going to be able to access additional power until hydro upgrades the entire town in 2023. The 2022 hydro upgrades would provide us an opportunity to add more electrical capacity at the hall, as well as support any future development, whether it be a pavilion or an indoor recreation facility or whatever. The 2022 hydro upgrades is first in line. This is a project that we've partnered with the Engineering and Public Works Department. Our recreation staff and myself, we're not experts, obviously, in facility management, and so we've been leaning heavily on that department and working with them to get this work done in 2022. Once we have power, we can upgrade our washrooms, so to give them a bit of a refresh and turn them into touchless facilities, sort of in line with the current realities of COVID and infectious disease. Following that, we would hope to look at developing some external storage. One issue we continually have, even with the new storage area, is just a lack of storage for new programs or existing programs that are expanding. And then following that, a portable trailer that we would again use as a programming space. And so those projects are far enough out that if something happens in the meantime, such as an indoor recreation facility or a pavilion or something else, that we can obviously remove those from the budget. But at this point, with no other alternatives in sight, we have those in the budget. The community hall covered patio is intended to provide a little bit more programming space. We have a pretty successful area outside. It's kind of an unplanned area, but it's the concreted area in the corner of the building where you enter the community hall. We're just hoping to potentially put a roof on there and provide some space that can be used in the more inclement months of Tofino. The community hall kitchen upgrades, I feel like this is maybe my third or fourth council we've discussed this on. Again, this is predicated on us getting more power at the community hall, and so the very first project there would be upgrading the commercial fan so that we can actually have a commercial kitchen up there again. We have some great equipment there. It's a really neat space. It just needs a little bit of extra resources to get it there. So again, this has been pushed back to post hydro upgrades to 2024 to 2026. And as council is probably familiar with, it's a three-phased project. Again, with the fan first, then some installation of the sinks and an island, chemical dispensers and a dishwasher, and then followed by a stainless steel prep table. So this, again, I think council is very familiar with it, but again, has been pushed forward again. That's it for recreation. I'm happy to take any questions or comments on recreation. I'll stop sharing for this portion.
Great. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Thick, Mayor Law.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I just want to say I'm really pleased to see the budget on recreation as the Recreation Commission liaison. So I just think it's been a little bit overlooked, and I think, well, I just applaud the fact that we've got some good ideas coming along here, and in particular for the youth. I was there last week when the youth were there, and I was blown away by how many kids showed up at, I think it was 7 o'clock that night. They were all over the place. So I think we really do need some safe indoor places that we can provide for our youth. And I think all that you're suggesting is going in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just don't want to let that go by, because I think I just want to echo how important that space is. So in terms of our youth program, which we haven't been able to do for 2 years because of COVID, in our first week back, we had 28 kids, and these kids are primarily coming from Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation communities, as well as Tofino kids. This last week, we had 34 kids. We have 3 people up there. This is the only place they have to go in the evenings, so they get to go to our community hall for 2 hours, stuff, and take advantage of what we have there. Again, you can't play sports or do much, but it's just a place to be. And I can't stress how important that is, or stress how important is my staff when they come back to me on the Friday mornings to talk about what happened and how important it's to them. And I just like to, again, echo that in being out at Halloween yesterday for the fire department, giving out candy, and how many children there are in this community. There are so many. There's the bus, my children are on the bus every day, and their buses, they've had to add a bus this year. There's more grade 8s than there are, combined grade 9, 10, 11, 12s. And that bulge goes back to kindergarten and preschool now. So there's just a wave of children coming. And I can't stress how important it is to continue funding recreation space. We can program it, but we just don't. We're basically out of space, and so, anyways, I thank you, Councillor, for giving me that opportunity. But it really is. It's a need it's just growing and growing every year.
My first comment is to echo that, Mr. Rogers. I'm very much in support of funding recreation and doing even more. So I encourage you in your efforts. It's money very well spent, and the return to the community and to people is really you can't put a value on it. I do have just one concrete comment. If you're going to do outside covered awnings or skylight or covered roofs or whatever, my only comment is please either consider something that lets the light through, like white vinyl, or skylights. That's my only comment. I'm sure you're very well aware of that, but I gotta put that in. It's dark.
It's a good point.
And I see Councillor Anderson, you have your hand up there.
I'm really glad to see that there's not much funding, we can have somebody working at the community hall. Anything to give it more life and more use is great. Also, really in support of the covered area outside there for the same reasons. I'm wondering if there's any opportunity to do fundraising in the community to possibly raise some money get that kitchen done that we've been talking about for, I don't know, 10 years or so, maybe more.
Thank you. I take all those points. I think that fundraising is something we could potentially talk to the Tofino Recreation Commission about. There's been a lot of new members there, and I'm not sure they're aware of this project. Some of them will be for sure, but some of them won't. So it may be something that we could add to the next TRC agenda and bring that up and talk about fundraising for that. Again, understanding that we probably need the power first, but that gives us a good runway to get those funds in place.
Yeah, and there's I guess the discussion will center around all the things we need fundraising for. But anyways, thanks, and I would support even more funding for recreation if you have any more ideas. But it's a shame that we're not funding it as much as the cost of a Mckenzie Beach area plan.
I knew that was going to come up.
Great. I do have some comments. Your lack of enthusiasm for recreation, Mr. Rogers, is palpable there, but I would concur with all the councillors as well in terms of and we've expressed that clearly over the years, the importance of recreation to this community over a long period of time. And just my one concrete sort of suggestion, the support for the community school that you've had in the budget over the 5-year time frame of it's approximately 11,330. In conversations with the community school board and the access to that, the only covered indoor sport type area, there is an openness to furthering that conversation. As everyone knows, with COVID, there is obviously some restrictions around there. I would suggest as one area that we might be able to see some increase in support for recreation in the interim is in that particular area. And I think there is a room for, my feeling was, I'm sitting on the board as a non-voting member now, that there is an openness to furthering the expansion of community access to that covered space. And with that in mind, I would suggest if in budget considerations that 11,300 could be increased without much dent in the overall budget. And I don't have a figure off the top of my head, but it might be a consideration when it comes to council, when it comes forward, that I may suggest a moderate increase over the next 5-year period and maybe have it prorated. I know conversations will be coming further in terms of other types of spaces, but in the interim, with the only one, as you pointed out, I think there is room for an increase in that budget area.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is actually an active conversation within the district management team, and we have been having those conversations on a variety of levels. So, programmer to programmer, manager to, administration, and with the understanding that if there's a potential to open up more space more often for different groups, that the district would be all ears to that. So up till now, and things are slowly changing, but it's been actually a very different conversation to have. It's not a conversation that we haven't had already. So I look forward to those discussions continuing and hopefully bringing forward council an amendment to the budget in January that shows that we've been successful in those conversations. And I think between myself and Ms. Atiana that we hear that and we'll continue the conversations that are ongoing.
Great, thank you. And if there's no further questions for the recreation, the next emergency planning, I think, would be the next section of your presentation.
Okay. Are you looking at the full screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, moving into building inspection. This is a shorter slide deck, and I may just do a building inspection and emergency preparedness together to consideration of everybody's time and the dinner hour. So we'll be seeing reduced contract revenue over the next couple of years as the building inspector transitions back to full-time in Tofino, and we expect next year to see an increased building permit revenue due to an estimated 2 buildings that are Part 3 projects, and those Part 3 projects are fairly large and usually result in a large amount of revenue. In terms of the contract revenue for the building inspector, it's my understanding that UQAT's in the final stages of hiring an inspector in UQAT, which is pretty exciting. It's our intent and our contract allows for our building inspector still to be there a day a week and to mentor that person into that position, as well as being able to work with the potential new building inspector on more complicated projects as our building inspector is certified to level 2. It's also exciting for us, and it'll probably be a reason to open up our contract with UQAT later this year or early next year to consider what we can do for each other in terms of staff illness or vacation. And so, at this point for Tofino, when our building inspector takes a well-deserved break or has a cold, it's our development community that suffers because they have to generally wait until the inspector is back in place to take a review of a project or a required inspection. So we're really excited in building that UQAT's almost there, and look forward to working with them over the coming years. So again, you can see our contract revenue declining. It's declined from last year and then this year as well, as we transition to 1 day a week, which we currently are now, and continue through 2022. And then 2023, we slowly wind down to 1 day a week up until July. And then there'll be no more contract revenue there unless there's some reviews being done for certain types of buildings. So again, that will probably be the form of the basis of a new contract negotiation with UQAT about that. In 2022, we're expecting a little bit more in terms of revenue, and similar to planning and in recreation, these are all estimates. And so you can see the years from 2023 to 2026 all show $87,000. Again, those are based on previous 5 years estimations. We're very conservative with our building inspection costs and understanding, what we think is coming down the road. This year, for interest sake, we had budgeted, I think, around $90,000 for revenue, and we're up, or maybe it was closer to 100,000. But anyways, we're up to about $129,000. So we're 30% over last year, or over our estimated for 2021, and that's been fairly consistent. These increases, but again, we're always going to be conservative about these because you can't really tell what's going to happen year to year in terms of how many things are going to be built. Staffing, office administration stays very stable over the next 5 years. We're not planning on hiring anybody else. In fact, we're going to put the building inspector, put his nose to the grindstone and get him working on more projects for us when he comes here 5 days a week. We have a contractor for code consulting that we use for buildings that we don't have the requisite levels of inspection to do. And in 2023, we're expecting our building inspector to reach the top level of inspection at level 3, and then we'll be able to bring a lot of that back in-house. So again, this is a service that is largely funded from our revenue, and we can see sort of a relatively stable amount through the 5 years coming forward. In terms of projects, we have 0 projects for the building inspector. I'm just going to move forward into emergency planning, and then I'll wrap it up and take any last questions. Our operating budget highlights for emergency planning: we have a $5 million vertical evacuation tower that we're considering that would be completely funded from grants and donations, which is pretty exciting. We also have our annual $20,000 transfer to reserve for our tsunami siren program, which allows us to develop a siren every 3 years. So here is what it looks like. Again, this $5 million is floating around a little bit. It may get pushed to 2023. It really is dependent on whether we're successful getting a $2 million grant that we're going to apply for. And then once that's in place, working with our potential donor to fulfill the remainder of that function. I will get into a little bit more of the details as we go through the projects in the following slide. Again, in emergency preparedness, we have 1 employee, and that employee is slated to be 1 employee for the coming 5 years. We have expenses for this Emergency Operations Center building, which again houses ourselves, everybody in community sustainability, plus the Bylaw department. Transferring expenses, again, if we receive these grants and contributions, they'll come into our transfer expenses and then moved over to, I think, to revenue. The 20,000 in each of those years is related to the siren development of the Tsunami Siren 5. So again, our projects change year to year, but are generally stable. And these are kind of the smaller projects, such as strategic plans. And then some of the bigger plans you can see in 2024, for example, would be the tsunami sirens. So in terms of actual project sheets for the emergency preparedness department, we're looking at something called a tsunami siren audibility review for next year. And the intent of this is that following the installation of the Mckenzie beach siren, which will be underway this month, we'd like to undertake a project to see what we can hear. So the entire tsunami siren project predates my time here, but was based off of a plan developed probably, I believe, around 2004 or 2006, and planned for coverage of audibility. So where do we need to put a siren so everybody who needs to hear them can hear them? And we've been following that plan to the T for the last, whatever it is now, 12 years. And we kind of want to make sure that the plan is still correct and that the sirens will do as they're intended to do in terms of who can hear them. So what we'd like to do is spend a significant funding this year to make sure that we know exactly where and how many more sirens we're going to need. So we have the Siren 5, we're already starting to plan for it and tax for it over the upcoming years. But before we get too far down that road, we want to make sure that we understand what's needed. So that's kind of an exciting project. It will involve a lot of public consultation, probably talk to Tofino and involve us firing off the sirens a lot. The next project is the vertical evacuation project. Again, this is primarily or completely funded by donation and grant. It will be located in the Chesapeake Beach area. Its intent is to provide a place of refuge for people in and around the Chesapeake Beach area. So we have a number of, this is the location that has the most amount of people who have the least amount of access to refuge in terms of tsunami. And so we're excited that, that this may be a possibility. Other parts of the community can get to high ground fairly quickly, but it's looking at the modeling that we've done over the years and the types of tsunami and earthquakes that we're going to be that we may be faced with. We're excited that this could be a possibility. The emergency program strategic plan, this is a plan for next year or for 2022. The intent is to work with the emergency program committee to develop a bit of a strategic plan for the next 5 years to make sure that we're focusing on what the committee thinks most important for the community. And, as a little bit of an opportunity to review what's happened over the last 5 years, which is night and day from the previous 5 years. So it's one of those times just to give us a little bit of a breathing room, do a little bit of a reset and make sure that we're still using the resources in the way that the committee and the community wants to see. Again, Tsunami Siren 5, I talked a little bit about this already in the previous slides, but this would be a project for 2024. It's the same request that we've made. There'll be the 5th time, obviously, we made it, $64,500. We collect funding for this in the 2 years previous. So in 2022 and 2023, we would collect $20,000 each year to reserve. and then take that $40,000 combined with taxation from 2024 to develop the project. Again, we're hoping to make sure we don't have a location determined for Tsunami 5. We've, looking at the plan, it would say somewhere downtown. But again, we're also working with the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation and their siren program to see, if that's necessary. If they have a siren that's hooked up to our system, what exactly do you need and where do we need it? Do we need something closer on the inlet side to make people aware in the the crab dock area and such? So these are the kind of things we just want to make sure we've got right before we just keep blindly putting sirens where what is now a fairly old plan has suggested. And that's it. Questions and comments. Thank you for listening.
Great, thanks, Aaron. And I'll look to council again to see if there are questions directly related to your presentation. Not seeing anyone, but I do have around the tsunami sirens and stuff, and you partially answered it for tsunami number 5 in the conversations with Tla-o-qui-aht, and I know that the conversations around the actual location will be based on the work that's coming forward. At this point, is there a direct communication with TFN specifically, I guess, with the pits in that location positioning for that, and if there's any potential for either leveraging each other's funding to bring that forward?
Yeah, so there's still an active conversation that's ongoing that we hope will at some point end up in some sort of agreement, maybe a memorandum of understanding with the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation sirens. Our intent, for sure, for the Pitsit siren, but potentially for the sirens at Long Beach to be connected to our system, and so that we're running one program for everybody that tests on the same day. That's that it's fired by one body. Those are so far to date have been really great conversations and very positive. I think it's just a matter of commissioning of those sirens, figuring out who's responsible for maintenance and at what level, and just making sure the organizations are aligned so that if that we're working together and we're responsible for making those sirens go off, that the sirens are working and all that kind of stuff. So it's I think something that both sides are really interested in doing together, and I think it's at this point we're just working out details and things like that. So just make sure that everybody understands exactly what everybody else's roles are.
Great. And one further, I'm very supportive of that strategic overview moving for the next 5 years, and I think it's critically important to identify those areas. And I'm just and I am assuming, but I just, my comment would be, I know that at the ACRD level there's a large regional push in terms of those conversations, and I would just comment that within that strategic overview that we're inclusive of a larger regional model with the ACRD in mind, between Ucluelet, Long Beach, Area C, to have that integrated into those conversations. So thank you very much for your presentation, Aaron. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And if there's no further questions or comments, I think that's it, Aaron. You're wrapped up, and we can move on to the 8.4 in the agenda, the 2021 Q3 financial reports. The excitement just never ends here at Committee of the Whole. I think I'm looking at Nyla, and I suspect she'll lead off this next portion.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I will start off this evening's presentation. I will just share my screen. So yes, we are all here today to present the Q3 financial report. I will start things off, and just wanted to note before we get into discussing any of the numbers that these are unaudited numbers at this point, and they are all subject to change. All the values that are provided consider information available up to and including September 30th of this year. So I will begin things by going over the financial officer's report, which will include a couple new things, which is a overview of our statement of income by fund, which we typically don't provide at this stage, but we were able to consolidate our statement and bring forward a snapshot of what the year is looking like year to date. Our 2021 taxation overview, how collection looked in the third quarter of this year, where the contingency budgets have been allocated in the general fund, water and sewer, and where the spending of the COVID restart grants have been overall this year as projected. We have some surplus balances for the year 2020, and we'll give a year-to-date update on user fees and charges. And then I will pass it off to the various departments to go over the statements of income as well, and the project status updates. And there will be time for questions and comments, but we will likely leave that to the end. But as I say that, please do feel free. As we are switching slides, we will have time for questions throughout if that's easier for everybody. So this first table goes over the revenues and expenditures for the year to date. So just to remind council that top section there is all the revenues that we projected for the year was at $20.4 million in the 2021 budget. So that includes all the monies we receive in and may transfer out to reserves or other agencies. It includes all projected grants. It also includes the amount we tax, user fees and charges, and any transfers in from reserve funds that we intend on using in the year. So that may look like a large budget, but for those that are attending the meeting, that includes all of our operating and capital expenditures. Or the funding sources for all of our operating and capital expenditures. So year to date, we're sitting at about $13.2 million after the year end. And as the projects are completed, we do transfer in other revenues from reserves. And there is sometimes a delay in receiving grants, and user fees and charges are not received equally throughout the year. So that won't necessarily match up proportionately with 3/4 of the year being over. Similar to expenses, we are sitting at $20.3 million in the projected budget. So this projected budget does have a bit of a difference at the bottom, which is $65,141, and that's the amount of contingency that we have available for the year. I'll go over where the contingency has been allocated throughout the year, but for the purposes of today's discussion, we've moved that out from the bottom of the statement and have included it into the various areas of the budget. The year-to-date actual for expenses is $9.3 million. And so that shows that we have a surplus of revenues year-to-date as of September 30th. And that's because of the timing difference on when we see expenditures and when we see the revenues come into the statements. So not surprising to see the numbers where they're at currently as of the end of Q3. In the water fund, we had projected revenues of almost $3 million with similar expenses, and the surplus sitting there is the contingency balance available for the year at $59,666. And I will go into that in a few moments to show council where that has been allocated year to date. And the year to date actuals is sitting at $690,000 for revenue, with expenses at $573. I'll talk a little bit more about utility revenue in a few slides. Not surprising to see things sitting where they're at for the year. Typically, the expenditures and the revenues do come in fairly evenly throughout the year from an operating perspective, but for capital, we don't see the funding of those projects come in until towards the end of the year. In the sewer fund, we had a budget of $2.1 million with the contingency balance sitting at the bottom there of $64,732 yet to be allocated. And year to date, we are sitting at $630,000 with the expenses at $437,000. We did project some capital expenditures with respect to the wastewater treatment plant, which is making some of those larger budgets. And so given the recent updates of that project and one that you will receive today, it's not surprising to not see those expenses come in just yet. So brief update on property taxation. The tax notices went out, as council is likely aware, on the end of May of 2021. The due date this year, which is July 2nd, or the first business day in July. This year was July 2nd of 2021. There were no supplementary adjustments up to September 30th. And what I mean by that is there were no adjustments to that revised assessment roll that we use to develop our tax rates. Sometimes throughout the year, if there's any outstanding appeals, we may receive some adjustments which would result in a refund of taxation or additional taxation. And there hasn't been any of that this year. There was no tax sale in 2020 or 2021. I'd just like to provide council with an update on that in the Q3 financial report for a couple of reasons. With respect to the 2020 tax sale, 2021 would represent, September of 2021 would represent the end of that redemption period. And I don't have anything to report on that because there was no tax sale. And in 2021, this is just an update on whether the properties that did go to tax sale were redeemed. And again, no update there because there was not a tax sale this year. So this is an opportunity to provide what we're looking at in terms of tax collection and compare that to previous years. So as of July 2nd, the tax due date, after the due date, our current taxes receivables were sitting at $776,446. That was an update I was able to provide at the Q2 financial report, but I wasn't able to compare it to provide comparisons later on in the quarter at September 30th. So you'll notice that I am providing in the next couple slides comparisons over year 2019 compared to 2021, rather than using year 2020, as that was a year that the pandemic started, and we just don't have accurate comparisons. We extended the penalty date for taxes, and that created some differences in behavior for tax collection and payment. So for September 30th, 2021, the current taxes receivables were sitting at $147,307. Compared to September 30th of 2019, it was slightly lower at $124,687. Given the small difference and the low value of what's outstanding, and as of September 30th, I'm not concerned with those two outstanding amounts, but I do like to provide them anyhow for an update to council. Taxes in arrears at September 30th. So taxes in arrears are that second year where taxes remain unpaid on a property. We're sitting at $20,692, and that was compared to 2019 where it was $46,944. So again, very low values. It was higher in 2019, but what this is showing is that there is a commitment to pay and a prioritization of property tax payments, even though compared to 2019, or 2021 is we're seeing sort of more difficult economic times, we are still seeing prioritization of property tax payments. So in that regard, our cash flow position for 2021, as it was in 2020, remains quite strong into Q3. 2021, the current tax penalty, so that's the 10% penalty that is implied after the tax due date, was $64,828. It was higher than what it was in 2019 at $47,916, but compared to the amount of taxes that are levied throughout the year on behalf of other agencies and municipal taxes, it's not an alarming penalty to see after the tax due date. Interest on arrears and delinquent taxes are that third year where taxes remain unpaid. Interest is accrued daily for after December 31st, where current taxes remain unpaid. Those interest and penalties remain quite low, as we typically see. So this year is at $2,383 compared to 2019, which was sitting at $9,000. So the next couple slides, I will go over where contingency has been allocated so far throughout this year. We started with a contingency of $203,861 as adopted in our 2021 to 2025 financial plan. I have previously reported out to council that Q1 and Q2 contingency was allocated at $83,295. Further additions were $10,867 to administration, and that was the the extension or increase of hours for the communications coordinator, and some other administrative items. Fire department, minimal allocations, emergency planning, and public spaces as well, minimal allocations. In public spaces, that was related to parks expenditures. Community sustainability at 12,504. We did make some changes to recreation in order to meet the requirements under public health orders. And in public works, that was the highest allocation, not surprising because that is an area with a significant budget at 23,467. And so that matches the balance that was shown on the first slide of 65,147. In terms of where that value is sitting, having 3 months left in the year, I don't have any concerns with us being able to meet any emergent expenditures that may come up throughout the remainder of the year. That is a typical balance for this time of year. And we often see our largest allocation of contingency in Q3 of each year. The 2021 water fund contingency, we've seen minimal allocations in the water and sewer fund. So I'll just very briefly talk about these two. We start out at about, between 75 and 80,000 in each of those funds. And we saw minimal allocations as reported out in Q1 and Q2. And we continue to see low allocations of contingency in both of these funds. So we're looking okay for the remainder of the year. For any contingency that's left at the end of the year, that rolls into surplus for the year, and then it comes back to council for further allocation, or for future allocation, sorry. I just wanted to take this opportunity to update council on the allocation of the COVID Restart Grant. So we allocated in this year's budget 355,713 to various areas of the general fund budget, mostly with respect to operations, for staffing resources and for materials and supplies as it related to increases as a result of the pandemic. So as council recalls, we have allocated 134,957 in 2021 and 2022 to increase bylaw resources in both of those years to ensure that over the busier summer months, we saw an increase in resources for the reservists as well as temporary bylaw enforcement. And I actually just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight that there was a recent article in the Westerly in response to budget discussions that we did have related to bylaw services in particular. There was a misstatement in the article indicating that the 134,957 that's to be allocated in 2022 for the COVID Restart Grants. It was misinterpreted just based on a question that came from council that was supposed to come from taxation as well. So it looked as though, or throughout the discussions we had at the budget meeting, it seemed as though the taxation amount in bylaw services would increase for 2022, but in fact, it remains quite consistent over 2021 and 2022 because we're able to allocate these COVID Restart Grants. Year to date, we've expended 36,898 in bylaw services. That doesn't mean we won't use those funds. It just means that some of those expenditures haven't been billed yet. So we expect to see that come up before the end of this year. I'll just go to recreation next because that was a larger allocation for 65,255, and we're seeing that at 47,731. So we will again see that even out for the remainder of the year. Similar to public works, we had to add additional resources and budgets for materials and supplies. So we expect to see that expended by the end of the year as well. Similarly in fire department, which was a small allocation, and emergency planning. For surplus balances, this is the first time I'm reporting out on the 2020 general surplus and water and sewer fund surplus balances. So these are based on audited figures. So these are not subject to change. These amounts I like to come in, I often just come in Q3 with these numbers and not typically straight after the audited financial statements are prepared, just due to timing and other priorities. So today I'm able to provide an update to council on what the 2020 surpluses were. In the general fund, it was lower than in more recent years at 326,991. And as council is aware, I'm hoping now that things are slowing down with the pandemic, I'm able to prioritize this policy and bring it back for council's consideration, the reserve fund and surplus policy. That somewhat relates to the next two items. The 2020 water fund surplus was 141,915. Some of the balance will be used in the 2021 budget. So we need to see where the year ends up and whether we require that surplus in the current year. And then I will be bringing some discussions throughout the reserve fund and surplus policy discussions about establishing working capital reserve funds for our utilities. And that would mean that the surplus wouldn't necessarily at the end of the year go into the capital reserves. It will be set aside and used for more for working capital and operating into the following year and stay within that utility instead of simply reserved only for capital. We would have the flexibility to use it for capital in the following year. I'll bring that discussion and in a more fulsome way back to council so we can talk about the flexibility and use of those surplus funds. In the 2020 sewer fund surplus, we had 266,647. 100,000 is budgeted to be used in the 2021 budget, and then the balance will be transferred to reserve, or we will bring forward the discussion for the working capital reserve fund. So there often are surpluses from year to year. These are not alarming amounts, and it is impossible to budget for the exact revenues we will collect and the exact expenditures that will take place in the year. We budget conservatively for the amount of revenue that will come in, and that will often result and mean that we do see surpluses in the year for user fees and charges we didn't anticipate through development, for example. And then we will sometimes not see expenditures being fully carried out where pricing may come in lower, than anticipated, or if projects are deferred to the following year, in which case we will reserve those funds if the projects do continue to take place. So just a brief update in user fees and charges in the general fund. Just going to the bottom line number there, we expected to be at approximately 1.8 million, and we're sitting at about 1.2 million year-to-date actual based on those various service areas. We can see that administration and bylaw services is where it was expected to be for this time of year. For parking, as council is aware, the program started later, and so those revenues are lower than anticipated. With respect to the Children's Center, the hours are limited compared to what was expected, and so those revenues are lower year to date. In recreation, we had to make some changes to programming and limit some registration with respect to public health orders. And I believe that's all I wanted to highlight in this section here. Everything is more or less what we projected it to be for the end of this quarter. For the water and the sewer fund, these revenues come in more evenly throughout the year. So I added an extra column here. So the first column shows the full 2021 budget. The next column shows the 2021 year-to-date actual, so only up till Q3 utility billing. And then I was able to just estimate where we may land for the end of Q4, and it's looking like we will be on budget for utilities based on what we collected for Q4 of last year, and we were able to project that out. So no concerns there. And that's the end of my report, but I will just briefly go over administration and the Community Children's Center Statement of Income before passing it on. So what we will provide to council this evening is a snapshot of the statement of income in each of the service areas. So it takes that larger consolidated statement of income I showed at the beginning with the $20 million budget, and it breaks it down by service area. So this is administration, which is the which is the department or service area that funds a lot of expenditures for the organization, such as IT, some legal professional services and consulting, audit fees as a few examples. So the budget for revenue and administration is $2 million, and year to date, it's at $859,000. It will be difficult to see a strong comparison in revenues at this stage. We don't typically bring in our transfers from revenue or see all of our grant funds come in until later on or late in the year or after the year end is being prepared. So you will see a discrepancy between revenues and or budgeted revenues versus actuals throughout the different service areas. In administration, we are projecting $3.7 million in expenditures throughout the year. Again, these are not happening evenly throughout the year. Typically transfers to reserves or transfer expenses out of the organization won't happen until much later in the year. And that's why we're seeing expenditures of $1.2 million. So we are sitting at currently just sitting at a loss of $395,000, and that's just due to timing differences. And by the end of the year, when we're able to present our audited financial statements, we expect to see that even out. For the Community Children's Center, we projected approximately $160,000 in revenue for 2021, and with our reduction of hours, we're actually still sitting at $101,256. So it's looking a little bit better than I had projected with the reduction of operations. With expenditures, we projected $258,081, and that was, the majority of our expenses are related to staffing expenses. And then the surplus or loss, the loss we see at the end is funded by taxation. So we are sitting at $143,682 for expenditures, and we're not surprised to see that proportion of revenues versus expenditures because we did also see a reduction in staffing levels throughout the year as we continue to recruit for the Children's Center. Okay, so I believe I'm going to pass it off to Sarah Gray, the communications coordinator, who is here this evening to present the corporate services Q3 financial report in the absence of Nikki Best. So I will pass it on to Sarah.
Thanks, Miss Atiana. I will just share my screen here for everybody. Perfect. And yeah, I will just begin by, I suppose, briefly saying hello to those of you who I have not yet met face to face. As Ms. Atiana said, my name is Sarah Gray and I'm the communications coordinator. Fortunately for everyone on the call at this point, the corporate services portion is rather brief. So I will do my best to just go through that here. So just starting off here, our year-to-date expenditure within corporate services is sitting around 180,000 with the 2020 budget for 303,000. A couple of highlights just to note on this slide. Council initiatives is currently sitting at 2,147. This is anticipated to remain under budget at the end of the year. That, for those that are unaware, includes things like our service awards, our USS scholarship, as well as some council open houses. As well on this slide, you'll see our council grants are also going to most likely end the year below budget. This, as council are already aware, some of our grants were somewhat undersubscribed this year, so that kind of explains that difference. And then as well, finally, our general council expenses. As with the pandemic and I suppose some lack of community to community meetings, town halls, council meetings, etc., those expenses are also most likely going to remain below by the end of the year. A few other pieces just to point out here: the elections expenses and the website redesign as well are below budget. And yeah, so with that, I will move on to my final slide here, which is the website redesign, which I am fortunate to be the project lead on this piece. So I'm very passionate about this project, but I will, for the benefit of everyone on the call, continue to keep it fairly brief. The budget amount for this project is 41,000. and with the 2021 budget amount at 35,000. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well as other staff members that I've spoken to on this. We are on track as well as under budget for this project. We have undertaken a couple of internal process pieces in terms of going through the website redesign, and I'm looking forward to being able to share this at a further date once we get closer to the official unveiling, I guess, towards the end of the year. So yeah, that is pretty much it for corporate services. So I will now pass it on, I believe, to protective services.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. I'll just be one moment here while I get my screen share on the go. Okay, protective services. We're going to start with the bylaw department tonight, and we've got our statement of income. So licenses and permits revenue. So this section, this includes business licenses, dog licenses, signage fees, application fees. At this point in the year, we're actually still anticipating a few thousand more in revenue based on previous years, where we tend to see between 1,500 and 3,500 that does come in October and November from business licenses, very late renewals, or perhaps change of ownerships and those sorts of things. So we do anticipate that increasing. The general admin expenses, those include things like salaries, training costs, legal fees, phones, memberships, uniforms, PPE, miscellaneous supplies. We have we're currently below budget in this area. Much of the difference there with the salaries and that was from salaries. So we did budget for additional staff this year. Just like many businesses, we struggled in filling some of the positions, and so ran a little short both in bylaw summer staff as well as the second reservist. We had partial coverage in those areas. So those were slightly lower, and then as the Director of Financial Services was indicating earlier, for the reservist fees, those don't actually get invoiced until a little bit later in the season, so we will see those numbers come up a little bit, but we're still under at this time. And then bylaw vehicle expenses, just typical insurance, repairs and maintenance and those types of items. Bylaw notices. So one thing that's important to notice when we're to realize when we look at this slide is that the amount does not indicate the value of tickets that is written. This is just for the revenue received. So we are currently working with Robbins to try and incorporate into their online payment system for the remainder of our bylaw notices, which will typically allow the revenue to come in faster and by providing increased accessibilities to the public. This will also reduce the number of notices that go through to the collections process, which we tend to receive less revenue when it goes through that route. At the time that this slide was created, I wasn't able to produce a thorough breakdown on the number of warnings for 2021. But if we look at that total fines issued, I would actually like to correct that. So our warnings specific is 110. We have had 549 notices that have been paid and 692 that are still outstanding. And I did go a little bit further into some of the details here just to get a bit of a breakdown on what types of notices these are. And so I picked just sort of the highest ranked ones. So things like 33 notices for people parking on sidewalks, 154 notices for vehicles parked causing obstructions, people parking where they're prohibited by signage is 339. But one thing that I have noticed is by reviewing some of the stats since the pay parking in the beach areas has come in, those types of notices are actually going down dramatically, and that's due to just better control systems and management with increased line painting and those types of things. So that's improving as well. Fire zones and hydrants, 90 tickets written in those areas as well. People parked exceeding time limits, not paid parking time, but the sort of 15 minutes, the 2-hour timelines, 70 for those. Permit required, we have about 90 people receiving those, and that's for not paid parking permits. That's for people parking where there should be offshore parking or and those types of things. And then, of course, the biggest one of all of them is vehicles used for accommodation, and that's 367 bylaw notices written for those as well. For business licensing, again, as I was mentioning, often as we get towards the end of the year, there's a bit of a scramble. So we do anticipate the numbers going up here, and actually speaking with the licensing inspector, he anticipates that the total number of licenses will end up exceeding 700 before the year is out. Okay, just transitioning into the fire department here. Again, starting with the statement of income. So the general firefighter expenses, these are going to include, again, things such as training, uniforms, insurance, firefighter support expenses. Training expenses often remain a little under budget until we hit Q4, as with the firefighters being volunteers, they're quite busy through the summer months with their other jobs. And so as we get into the fall season, that's when they have more availability and a bit more the training takes place. So we do anticipate that going up. The general admin expenses include things like salaries, internet, phones, licenses, legal fees, and fire prevention. And then fire hall expenses. This one seems to continue to rise or become more important year after year. It's the maintenance and repair of the building, hydro and the alarm monitoring. The maintenance and the repairs, it's definitely ongoing. This building gets a lot of use, much more use in the last 10 years than it did in the previous 20 years. So the heavier use means much more upkeep, and it's things like electrical, replacing windows and those types of things. And then the last one on this one is indemnities, and this would include practice and fire calls, as well as the department indemnities, which are the stipends that are paid out to the officers at the end of the year. So again, the stipends that won't show up in the numbers until the last quarter. And then the fire calls and practices, that one is actually increasing. So just a bit more on the training and incident indemnities. As we look back over the last few years, you can see that it is rising. In 2020, we had substantially lower numbers, and that was a result of the province pulling firefighters off of first responder calls in order to maintain our health and safety during COVID and keep us prepared to deal with more fire-related incidents. With the way situations have been developing, they weren't able to maintain that, and we've been back to work for all types of calls. And we're actually on track now for possibly the busiest season in the history of the fire department. Switching into the projects, we did have the duty officer vehicle. This project is actually complete, and this vehicle went into service just in time for this Halloween weekend. The safety equipment, again, this one is also complete. It has been for a little bit. This was the purchase of some of the tools, the PPE drying racks, and additional turnout gear. And then, of course, there was the volunteer emergency response building. That was the grant that we were seeking, and unfortunately unsuccessful in that one. And that's everything for protective services, fire, and bylaw. So I will pass this on to the manager of community sustainability and planning. And I will just exit and make that possible right now.
Thank you, Chief Baker. I'm just going to share my screen here. Great. Happy to be back with council this evening. We're going to go through the same departments that we went over briefly with my 2022 to 2026 budget. We can see that, again, this is Q3 that we're tracking right. We think, again, our development application fees are probably going to be higher than expected by the end of the year. And we can also see that in our cost recovery miscellaneous line item that we're significantly higher than expected, largely due to, I think, a lot of legal budget coming back to legal fees coming back to the district through various development applications. In terms of our general administrative expenses, again, I think we're tracking to close to where we expected to be at the end of the year. Our consulting fees are lower right now, but expected to come up close to the 35,800 by the end of the year as we complete the monitoring project, the OCP monitoring project. And then again, also related to some of the other projects, we can see we're significantly lower, and that's because some projects are going to be deferred to 2022. One of those deferred projects is the Forest and Tree Strategy Protection Bylaw. We had some staffing resource issues this year in the department, and you'll see this is a common theme through this next couple of slides. We expect to get this up and moving pretty soon in 2022. Here we go again, the zoning bylaw rewrite, deferred to 2022 as well. This is a project that I may be able to actually get working on sooner, but won't be using any of the funding until 2022 at this point. The housing needs assessment report is in progress, and council can expect to see a completed version of this project in November or in this month. Moving quickly into recreation, again, nothing too significant to report. We tend to see, in terms of our program revenue, we tend to see a heavier load of programs in the fall as people we get back to school and kids start taking the programs. We may see a little bit less than expected this year just due to attendance issues that we're noting, largely related to a lingering concern over COVID and some with some issues with the vaccination passport. In terms of programs expense, those tend to track with the revenue. So we receive the revenue and then spend the expenses on our instructors and their equipment. So pretty satisfied with where this is heading. Just with the note that we may see a little bit less revenue and less expenses due to lingering COVID concerns. Community hall upgrades, I think we discussed this briefly in my previous presentation, but this has been deferred to 2022, and that we're working with Public Works and BC Hydro to finalize that plan in expectation of turning on switches in 2023. Community sustainability, emergency planning. So we have a large project revenue that we haven't spent any money on. This is related to the earthquake probability project. This is funded primarily from, I believe, 100% from grants. That's just started underway now. We've just issued finalized the contract, and they're starting to do work on that. The transfer revenue is related to tsunami sirens, which is expected to happen in Q4. Our general admin expenses are tracking in line. Our expenses for the tsunami siren, it's for the tsunami siren and the probabilistic study are expected again in Q4. We tend to do a lot of our purchasing of equipment in Q4 for various reasons. One of those being Black Friday. So we expect to see that come up by the time we meet again at the end of the year. Building inspection, building expenses. We may see this one of these projects deferred, so that the difference there is about $15,000, and that's related to a staircase addition to the building for a better emergency access. We're just reviewing that project and deferring it for now to 2022. And again, the transfer expenses, I believe, are related to the tsunami siren project 64,500 that's just started. The community recovery framework, we've been really busy in emergency preparedness through COVID, and we've had to unfortunately push this project to next year, just dealing with internal resource constraints. Again, we'll be partnered with Public Works on this project, and one of the projects they're doing to try to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can with taxation funds. So now we're starting for Mckenzie Beach, as I've alluded to, starts now or very soon. So that was expected to be completed by the end of the year. The probabilistic earthquake and tsunami risk assessment, that's the 100% grant funding. That will give us a better idea of what's happening, what the different types of earthquakes that we may be subject to, and then how to adjust all of our various strategies and plans related to that. Finally, building inspection is tracking well. As I said in my previous presentation, we're seeing a 30% increase in our 34% increase in what we expected this year, just due to the pace of building. The transfer revenue, I believe, is related to the STEP code grants, and I believe that's we'll expect to see that increase by the end of the year. In terms of expenses, that's just tracking in line with where we expect it to be. The vehicle expenses is actually a Public Works vehicle at this point, but coded out of our department. That's the Prius. So building inspection is looking good. I would like to now hand it over to the manager of Public Spaces, Cultural and Visitor Initiatives.
Thank you, Manager of Community Sustainability. I'll just take a moment to share my screen. Is everyone looking at the presentation slide? Perfect. So I'll review the PSCAVI, as we call it here at the office, but Public Spaces, Cultural and Visitor Initiative Statement of Income. Some of these are fairly self-explanatory, like filming fees. Others are a little more complex, so I'll go through those. Tourism revenue, that's the MRDT and the MRDT OAP revenue coming into the district. And tourism expenses is the MRDT going out to Tourism Tofino, also Info Center utilities, and the MRDT OAP amount going out to the Tofino Housing Corporations. General admin expenses is most of the parks related expenses, parks, trails and repairs, maintenance, improvements, parks, tools and equipment, insurance, hydro, any contracts, salaries, staff expenses, things like phones, mileage, that type of thing. Transfer expenses, you'll notice shows 0 in the year-to-date actual, and that's because the transfers to various capital projects, those happen at the end of the year, which the Director of Financial Services mentioned as well earlier in the presentation, and that's why the year-to-date shows as 0. And resort services and resort infrastructure expenses includes all of the RMI funded projects and programs. Tourism expenses is again the MRDT revenue flowing through to Tourism Tofino. So I think that's all we need to talk about there. Cemetery improvements. So this project saw new soil and sand brought in and spread on site at the cemetery, and it was becoming problematic to maintain the surface there because it was getting quite uneven over a number of years. So this work has happened, and because we were able to do this work in-house, thanks to having a temporary parks employee this summer, we were able to keep the costs considerably lower than what had been budgeted. So this is largely complete now. There's also some limbing of large overhanging trees to just brighten up the area a little bit and reduce the shade that was causing some problems with the turf at that location. Seasonal shuttle service. So the seasonal shuttle service is under budget for this year. Again, this is substantially funded through the Resort Municipality Initiative program. We did have a shorter season this year, so that's a big part of the reason that expenses were slightly lower, and that's due to just the uncertainty around COVID. The service would normally have started in the middle of June, around June 15th, and run to September 15th, but just because of the lack of confidence we felt in folks' comfort in riding the bus, and some challenges we had also with getting our electric bus off the ground, which was very exciting to pilot. And so that was in part responsible for the later start as well. Excuse me. So the seasonal shuttle performance this year, something that I did let council know was significantly lower. The rider numbers were significantly lower than in past years. And part of that is due to the shorter season, but it is thought to be largely related to riders, folks just having less comfort with being in an enclosed space during COVID-19 with other passengers. So certainly we saw a significant decrease, even less than half of what we would normally see. I will highlight that, from 2014, which is not shown on this slide, but through to 2019, we saw a steady increase in ridership. So the thought is that this is a COVID-19 related impact that we're seeing on the level of ridership. Cox Bay Maltby South washrooms, this project is currently out for tender, and a cost estimate based on the final detailed design puts the cost at about $284,000, and that is including a 20% contingency. So it is anticipated that more funding may be required for this project to be completed. We'll know that when the tender period closes on November 12th. And due to the value of the project and as per the district's purchasing policy, that award of the construction contract would come before council. And based on what the lowest tendered price is at that time, staff will propose additional funding as required. And on the next slide, I have a sneak peek of what that facility will look like. So this is as described at the Maltby Road location, and that is one of our busiest, if not the busiest, beach access. And the size of the structure does reflect that. So it includes 4 separate accessible non-gender specific stalls. So people can fully enclose themselves in there for all the privacy that they need, as well as 2 accessible showers. Those are on the outside here, 3 change rooms, including 1 accessible family change room, covered bike parking, water bottle filling stations, and of course a maintenance and janitorial room as well. And there's also some surfboard racks just for short term on the back of the building, so you can stow your board while you're using the facility. Skate park repairs and resurfacing. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat, I think, at this late hour. This work is about to start. In fact, so I just saw during the meeting, there was some social media that went out. Thank you, Sarah Gray, for letting the public know that the park will be closing next week for about 5-6 weeks in order for that work to take place. So it'll be fully fenced off and enclosed. So no expenses as of Q3, but we expect that all of that work will happen in Q4. And the skate park should be reopened in mid-December. Oh, I should add too that there's more information available if any community members are wanting more information, although I notice everyone has left the meeting. We have no attendees. But should anyone be watching this on YouTube, there is more information available on Talk to Tofino. And again, thank you to our communications coordinator for setting that all up. And it's really great to have somewhere to direct people to learn more about the project. Multi-use path resurfacing from Sharp Road to Hotel Z. And as council is aware, this project was expanded in scope to include within the existing budget to include the Jensen's Bay Hill, as we sort of locally have been referring to it. And this work, while not much was fully complete at the time of the end of Q3, very quickly into the first week or so of Q4, the project was substantially complete. Most of that work is now complete, with the exception of line painting, which due to the supply chain challenges in getting line paint, it seems like it's a very difficult thing. Multiple contractors were unable to source line painting, and now we're into of course, the weather window. So that work will take place in the spring, and we're waiting for a few barriers to be placed near the Jensen's Bay Hill section where the school bus shelter is to separate vehicle traffic from the multi-use path. But that should happen in the coming weeks. And this project was, although it's not shown on here, I can say it was completed well within budget. Tennis and basketball court upgrades are scheduled for Q4, just the design component only, with the lion's share of the work happening in 2022. So no expenses to date there. Trail toilets. So these there's 2 toilets. They are the innovative urine diversion toilets, which I feel like I've been talking about for far too long. So those toilets are installed. The one on the Big Tree Trail is now open and up and running, and the one on the Tonquin Trail is just waiting for some final details and sign off on the drainage drain field. So that should be opening very soon. We did encounter some challenging site conditions. Not a surprise on the West Coast. This seems to happen a lot, where just the subsurface conditions and the old growth forest, the depth of tree roots and things like that are just not anticipated, and some redesign was required. So we are seeing some additional expenses there. Campbell Street Phase 3 design. I feel like I've probably talked about that enough for this evening, but again, this was completely funded by RMI and a rural dividend grant, and as of Q3, we've used up a good chunk, but not the entire budget. Cycling racks. The cycling racks themselves have been purchased and installed at North Chesterman and Cox Bay Maltby Road at the end of the beach trail. And as of today, one of the racks is it's almost covered, and so we'll be moving on to the second rack, covered shelter after that for those 2 projects. Multi-use path redevelopment, the sustainable transportation node between Olson Road and Gibson Street. Again, this is funded by Tourism Dependent Communities Fund grant. It was a one-time grant, COVID recovery oriented funding that was made available through the Ministry of Tourism. And that work is underway, but as of Q3, just minimal expenses. And more will come to council on this project in the coming months. And with that, I will pass it over to the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works. I will stop my screen share.
Thanks, April, and good evening, Mayor and Council and the public. I'll just switch over to my set of slides and run Council through what I think is the last group of slides for tonight. I have about 35 slides, so with Council's patience, I'll rip through these pretty quickly and allow the questions to dive into those areas which are of interest or have specific questions. It starts off with a parking statement of income. We have been quite conservative and did a bit of a pivot in the middle of 2021 to look at what our earnings from parking would be, having started the program in August vice the 2020 estimate of May. We also, when we adopted the 2021 budget, that also included some assumptions about staffing and bylaw performing enforcement duties, which of course we're under contract with Robbins now. So we've gone and adjusted this, and we've been quite conservative on our earnings so that we would work towards having net revenues or a net earnings here in the parking business unit. And we are remaining a little, and then we reduced our expenditures to suit so that we wouldn't be overspent with the reduced revenue months in service. So what we're doing now is we're just getting ready to define the highest priority remaining items. And then now that we have this set up for potential reserve application for next year, we would see any surpluses potentially moving back into the parking for the expansion in the downtown for next year. Overall, though, our priorities in parking infrastructure remain on improving some safety, electrical lighting and safety issues in and around some of the beach parking lots, and most notably the introduction of the kiosks or the timber structures that will go over the pay stations, which will provide weather and some refuge for patrons that are using those, as well as safeguarding the stations themselves from some of the most severe weather. Those will look and feel similar to the shelters that are along Campbell Street, as well as a little bit different, but similar to the kiosks that are in place in the park already. That's just a summary of where we're at with those, like I said, with the remaining funds going to those 2 priority areas. Public Works statement of income, maybe not the most interesting slide from a revenue earning perspective. Most of everything that we do in Public Works is transfers over. Maybe more of interest would be the statement of our expenses, which are here, which show some deltas between 21 budgets and year to date. The The fleet expense line item that you see at the top there is related to the aggregate totals for maintenance across the whole fleet. So we expect some of those numbers to climb up quite sharply in the last quarter here and get more close to that 2021 actual. We also, moving down to that yard building expenses, which is an aggregate total that encapsulates things like maintenance supplies, tools, and even hydroelectricity, we'll see climb up over the next quarter. I think overall, council will see a bit of a theme from me in my presentation slides here, which talk about catching up in the last quarter. Some projects that will be incomplete or potentially straddle the 2021-2022 fiscal years, mainly, or a large handful of those, due to the fact that we didn't get the manager staffing that we would hoped in the spring of 2021, and we've been running a staffing shortfall for the year, which obviously has its implications from a resource and an overall throughput perspective, as well as some projects coming in under budget. So I'll try to hit on those kind of three main themes throughout my slide deck here. The equipment admin is at 210, which 160,000 of which is fleet purchases. We've executed 2 used truck purchases in the last 2 weeks out of the 5 that we plan to do in 2021, all of which we're seeking used vehicle purchases, and we're all saving about $16,000 to $20,000 per purchase right now, looking at vehicles that are just a few years old that have a reasonable mileage, so that they'll have a long and a healthy life here at the district. So we'll continue to search for opportunities there and jump whenever we can to save those dollars. Streets is coming in under right now. We have completed our street condition assessment and some of the other action items that are associated with that, and that number will come up in the last quarter a bit. And then things like stump dump, which is under at 17,244. We have completed the engineering reviews of the stump dump, environmental monitoring, and geotechnical analysis for slope stability and the end of life and planning for, or the through life planning for that asset. So I'll be working with finance to conclude some of that stuff, and we'll bring more information before council for updates and decision points. The beach parking lot improvements in 2020 was set as a separate line item just in case pay parking didn't move forward. So we remained underfunded here, under totals here for actuals, again, as part of that exercise to save funds based on the limited revenues that we would see in the first year. But we are going forward with some improvements to increase the safety, notably some of the lighting and some of the infrastructure that's at 1431 Cox Bay, and Maltby Road improvements. The asset management program has been slow in 2021, mainly due to a lack of resources. This is the corporate part of the program development and framework and templates and toolkit development. Asset management overall has many shapes, sizes, and forms throughout our portfolio, and everything that we're doing really is in order to move this ahead. We have acted in order of priority in these areas to make sure that we are doing the condition assessments, inventorying, and upgrades that are most important and potentially addressing the highest risks. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the following slides. But we did set aside $65,000 for this year to look at training, GIS and tool set development, as well as the framework itself. We are working on this. It's just a bit slow, and we aim to have a significant update by the end of the calendar year. Climate action planning, we are on contract now with a consulting group that will deliver this $20,000 exercise, which is to identify the high-level strategy for adaptation for our community, and to put a set of information in our hands that would be complemented next year by the mitigation strategy, which is planned to spend some of those other funds that have been allocated. EV chargers, largely deferred to 2022, although we have an opportunity to purchase some equipment that would be installed, some of which we can go ahead with without the power upgrades from BC Hydro, but the full suite of actions that we wanted to progress this year, we'll have to wait to be energized until Hydro finishes its power upgrades at the end of 2022. But we still have meaningful progress to make some improvements here, and most notably replacement and upgrades to the units that need it most, like at the municipal hall, and some other units that we can install with the available power. Zero waste bins. So far this year, we've been able to reconfigure some of the waste bins at different locations and save some money. And we had an $8,000 set aside for this year, and I still have a little bit more to spend, and we'll have to upgrade a few of the damaged wild safe bins in and around town so that we can make sure that those are serviced properly and providing functions for the users in the public realm. MUP safety delineators was $50,000 from the district funds with the potential for $25,000 from external, which we did not get. So essentially 2021 was a $50,000 financial allocation. We've spent 30 to date, and we're just planning with MOTI before we actually purchase the next round of these, which may need to allocate some money towards some of the engineering and transportation design support. But we'll continue with the aesthetic that we enjoy in front of the Tofino Resort Marina, with a burlier set of protections for the pedestrian and cyclist users along those rights of way. Road design projects, the next two slides are going out for RFP this week. They're just being reviewed with procurement consultant support today. And hopefully these, which is Sharp and Arnett, which would be designs ready for, and Gibson's, sorry, the third one, would be designs ready for the end of the wastewater treatment project, when those rights of way will be disrupted through some of the utility installations. Gibson Street redesign between the connectors between First and Second Street is underway currently, and sorry, First and Third, and that's in play right now with McElhaney Consultants. The Lynn Road and Chesterman Road will go out as an RFP later this week as a standalone set of road design projects, and we would hope to have some concepts ready for discussion with council at and around the Christmas timeline. Mckenzie Beach Road improvements was just money set aside to make sure that we were tender ready for Mckenzie Beach Road. We're almost there, and we're just working on some final changes to make sure that we can have that done by the end of this year, so that that's shelf ready for when we need it, based on the outcomes of the road condition and sidewalk condition assessments, and then recommendations from staff as to the priorities overall across the road network in town, across our district. The Olson Road storm main is delayed at the for archaeological and ministry approvals. We've taken a decision to go out to tender for this with that delay in mind, which would of course extend the timeline for completion for this project into 2022, but we still want to tender this now so that we can have some commitments to make this drainage improvement for as soon as possible. And we continue to work with the ministry to see if we're able to get that underway, and have had supports from the First Nations for this project moving forward. The 4th Street to Gibson's storm and sidewalk, and the next project here had budgeted amounts of $75,000 and then $25,000 for 2 drainage projects in and around the Gibson's location in the elementary school, one on 4th Street and one at the corner of 3rd and Gibson. These projects, we're just nearing our opportunity to award these projects to the preferred contractor so that we can get in the ground and have these complete before Christmas, with pavement remediation to follow. As I mentioned before, fleet replacement for 2021 and an allocation of $167,000, which is underway, which we are planning to be complete before Christmas. This involves, of course, jumping at opportunities with used vehicles that might be in the Lower Mainland or various places over the island, and we're trying to do that in a way that minimizes the impact to our resources and the support resources that are required to make those purchases happen. So we continue to work with all the teams to see if we can jump at those deals wherever possible. The next group of slides is about water, followed by sewer. Water revenues here, which are obviously dominated by user fees. We have under expenses there, we have the first line item, which includes wages, hardware, and various other line items which are inside that particular summary. The next line item at 206,197 for the budget includes the water master plan, which continues to move forward, albeit at low financial total so far, and also includes the DCC technical report and the asset management plan, which are shared as expenses between water and sewer utilities. The bottom line at water treatment meters and lines is separated as a combination of 3 different service areas or operations and maintenance areas between the expenses for water treatment, which include things like service reviews for the SCADA system, critical repairs, and to different locations, including the 2 treatment plants and Number 1 Creek, which we keep moving forward on, as well as meters themselves and the water lines. So we continue to make some progress here, and I expect this total to rise quite sharply in the next quarter. But anything that remains underspent or any areas that we need to improve are our fine tuning on our budget allocations we'll be reviewing as part of the 2021 and 2022 financial planning process. The DL 117 reservoir rechlorination station came in with estimates at 75,000, quite a bit more than we had planned. So we've gone back out to the marketplace to ask for an updates here to see if we are able to find something that's more affordable. The DCC technical report is a report that we will do once the water master plan is matured to a certain point, as well as some inputs from the overall asset management framework in combination with the other departments to make sure that we have a good report here. And that's likely deferred till next year. Bay Street water treatment upgrade, which is a 1.5 million nominal UV treatment upgrade for a second form of disinfection at Bay Street, is currently on hold, as we've discussed at the financial planning meetings a couple of weeks back, and we'll be in front of council soon to recommend a way forward on this particular project, which is an important project for the overall public health, and that second form of treatment that we're legislatively obligated to provide. The district water master plan, right now, we have about $20,000 in outstanding bills to come in from one of the consultants, and about $15,000 from another consultant that's currently underway. And then we have some other support work from a third consulting group, all of which is in effort to move this forward. As briefed in 2020, we expect that there was a potential for us to be under budget here in this area but we did put money aside just in case this important project was going to cost quite a bit more, depending on how our responses came back from the marketplace, but we're still able to move forward here with a little bit under what we forecasted. And I would expect to see this total at about 45,000 by the end of the calendar year, with a rollover into 2022 to complete the program with more check-ins with council, of course. We have several water main projects that are going out for RFP this week as part of that review process that happened today with the procurement advisors, and we expect those to hit the market shortly with responses in about 4 weeks' time. We're just waiting for some final information on price and installations from some inspections that we've recently done over at Mears Island to increase the functionality of both cameras and optical equipment, as well as flow sensors, and we expect to be in a position to purchase those and get those installed close to December, January in the coming months. And then on to sewer. The sewer looks and feels a little bit similar to the water, of course, dominated by revenues from user fees, and then expenses go across the maintenance and operations costs across all of our sewer infrastructure, which of course includes the lift stations, as well as the sewer lines themselves. And then, of course, the wastewater treatment plant coming online in the next year or two. As I said before, the asset management planning and the DCC reports are shared expenses between sewer and water, and you see those reflected in the underspends on the 69,238 line item. And we see right here that the lift station $206,786 was relying on $90,000 for the valve isolations at 3 different lift stations. That RFP came back with 0 bids, unfortunately, and we're going back out with another request for proposals for that particular valve installation, which is estimated at 90,000, without a deadline on the time, in order to see if we can attract some more bids that would be in 2022 for that important work to increase the isolation ability and the safety of the worker when working in the lift stations. Lift station generator replacement, we were looking at purchasing before the end of the calendar year, but there will be a 2022 delivery based on COVID-related logistics delays in the system. We had an opportunity to buy a different piece of equipment earlier, but we didn't want to reduce the commonality that we had across the other infrastructure. So we'll look at purchasing the right gear, but it'll come with a delay. The next 3 projects, which I always group together in my slide, the lift twinning of the force main and the 2 subsequent upgrades to the lift stations, all have the same set of commentary, which is that they are subject to an engineering review, which is getting ready to be released as part of those RFPs, which is also going to talk to us a little bit about the timing and the risks and the options associated with those upgrades before we enter a design process, which will, of course, drift into the 2022 timeline and fiscal year. The wastewater treatment plant, we are just awaiting our final updates from WSP and our contractor so that we can report back to council on the cost required to finalize detailed design process, which is underway right now, using the monies that we had saved from the previous phase of work. And we're just waiting for the final update that will be reviewed by the CAO and myself before we can return to council to talk about considerations and relevant commentary from council before those projects are move forward towards that detailed design completion. So we'll be back in front of council within a couple of weeks on this particular project for an update and some decisions so that we can continue to move forward where we would be in a position to submit the latest and greatest information to our provincial and federal funders after council agrees to move forward in that direction. On that note, I will stop sharing screen. I will exit out of my presentation and open up for, I think, questions for everyone, I believe. So I'll mute myself and
I'll unmute mine. Thank you, Fraser. Appreciate it, and to all the directors from all the departments for the Q3 reports. I'll open it up. I know it's getting really late in the evening, and everyone's blood sugar is low, so I will open it up if there are any direct questions related to the directors' reports for Q3. And I will. I see Councillor McMaster and I saw Councillor Thick smiling. I don't know what that meant, but I'll start with Councillor McMaster and we'll move from there.
Just a general question for Nyla. I was in a meeting this weekend where people were talking about reserve funds and surpluses, and they were moving it out from MFA because they were getting a better rate at the banks. Have you looked into that lately?
So just Nyla's had to leave the meeting unexpectedly. She left a few moments ago. So maybe I can answer that by saying we always look for the best rate. MFA has historically been the best rate. And if that does change and we can get long-term secure rates, then that's something that would indeed be worth looking at. But I will pass the question along to Nyla.
Okay, thanks a lot. I was just surprised to hear it. That's all. So I'm just passing it on.
It surprises me also.
They weren't all small or big communities either. So it's quite a range. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor McMaster. Any other councillor have questions for staff? Not seeing any, and I won't defer any. I have a few, but I think I'll go offline with the Director of Infrastructure, Mr. Works, for some questions around contracts and stuff. That being said, thank you all directors for the reports. Appreciate how much time and effort goes into providing this information to us at this time. So thank you all, and go get some food. Coming up onto agenda item number 9. If there is any unfinished business, I don't really care. So we'll move right into, I know there are no questions because everyone left the house. Oh, sorry, I see CAO, Mr. McPherson.
And Councillor Steer, I appreciate the lateness of the hour. I have an administrative item that is time sensitive. So maybe we can wind this up, and once everyone's had a chance to leave, if I could just have 5 minutes of council's time.
Roger. Okay, and I'll put that right after. I know there is no question period. There's nobody there, so
we can adjourn and then just have I just need a quick discussion with council.
Excellent, super. So if I could have a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor McMaster, and thank you for seconding, Councillor Thick. All those